Story 1. The Loop on Route 52. Marcus Chen had been driving 18-wheelers through the Appalachian Mountains for 17 years. He'd seen dense fog that turned highways into tunnels of white nothing, black ice that sent trailers jackknifing across 3 lanes, and snowstorms that buried entire truck stops under 6 feet of powder. But nothing in those 17 years prepared him for what happened on Route 52 in southern West Virginia during the autumn of 2019. It was October 23rd, around 11:47 p.m. according to his dashboard clock. Marcus was hauling a load of industrial machinery parts from Charlotte to Columbus, a route he'd driven at least 40 times before. The night was clear, unseasonably warm for late October in the mountains. His CB radio crackled with occasional chatter from other drivers, mostly complaining about construction delays near Charleston. The full moon hung low and orange over the ridgeline, casting long shadows across the 2-lane highway that wound through the hills like a black ribbon. Marcus knew Route 52 intimately. Every curve, every grade, every mile marker was burned into his memory. He could practically drive it blindfolded. That's why he noticed immediately when something felt wrong. He just passed the Bluewell exit, which meant the next landmark should be the abandoned Glenwood gas station in about 8 miles, followed by the turnoff for County Road 16 in another 3 miles after that. Simple, straightforward, a drive he could do in his sleep. But when his headlights swept across a familiar landmark, his stomach tightened. There, on the right side of the road, was the same twisted white oak tree he'd passed 15 minutes earlier. The tree was distinctive, a lightning-scarred giant with one massive branch that extended over the roadway like a skeletal arm. Marcus had noticed it because someone had tied a faded yellow ribbon around the damaged section. He remembered thinking it looked like a memorial marker. He checked his odometer. He'd driven 11.4 miles since Bluewell. The tree should have been long behind him. Yet there it was again, same yellow ribbon fluttering in the breeze from his passing truck. Marcus slowed down, his eyes scanning the roadside for other identifying features. His headlights picked out a small wooden sign he'd also seen before, "Ginseng buyers 2 miles ahead." "That's not right," Marcus muttered, reaching for his GPS unit mounted on the dashboard. The screen showed his truck as a blue dot moving steadily northwest along Route 52, exactly where he should be. No indication of any loop or detour. The map showed the road continuing straight through the mountains toward his destination. Nothing unusual, nothing wrong. Marcus keyed his CB radio. "Breaker, breaker, this is Night Rider eastbound on Route 52 near Bluewell. Anybody else on this stretch? Got a weird situation here. Over." Static answered him. Then more static. The CB had been working perfectly just 20 minutes ago. Now it was dead air, not even the usual background noise of distant conversations or channel bleeding. Complete silence. He drove on, watching his odometer tick upward. 5 miles, 7 miles, 10 miles. His fuel gauge showed he'd burned through the expected amount of diesel. His engine temperature was normal. Everything about the truck's operation was completely standard. But then his headlights found it again. The white oak tree with the yellow ribbon. The same tree. The exact same tree now appearing for the 3rd time. Marcus pulled over onto the narrow shoulder, his hands shaking slightly as he set the air brake. He grabbed his cell phone from the cup holder. No signal, not even 1 bar. He was in the mountains, so spotty coverage wasn't unusual, but he'd had 3 bars just before passing through Bluewell. Now his phone showed no service in the corner of the screen. The digital clock on his dashboard read 12:33 a.m. He'd been driving for 46 minutes since noticing the first repetition of the oak tree. By his calculation, he should have covered at least 35 miles. But according to every landmark he could see, he hadn't moved forward at all. He was caught in some kind of loop, passing the same section of highway over and over while his truck insisted it was moving forward normally. Marcus sat in the darkness, engine idling, trying to rationalize what was happening. Maybe he'd fallen asleep. Maybe this was a dream. He pinched his forearm hard enough to leave marks. The pain was sharp and real. He wasn't sleeping. He opened his logbook and wrote down the time, his location, and what was happening. His handwriting looked normal. His thoughts felt clear. This wasn't exhaustion or hallucination. He put the truck in gear and continued driving, but this time he paid obsessive attention to every detail. He counted telephone poles. He noted every roadside reflector. He watched for animal eyes in the tree line. Everything appeared exactly as it should. The road curved gently left, then right, then straightened for a long stretch. A small creek ran parallel to the highway for half a mile before disappearing under the roadbed through a concrete culvert. He saw a speed limit 55 sign, followed by a steep grade ahead warning. And then, impossibly, the white oak tree appeared again. Fourth time. Same yellow ribbon, same lightning scar. Marcus felt his chest tighten with genuine fear. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. This wasn't a mistake or a misidentification. He was trapped in a repeating loop of highway that shouldn't exist. The dashboard clock now read 1:19 a.m. He'd been caught in this impossible situation for over 90 minutes. His fuel gauge had dropped by a quarter tank. His body felt the fatigue of nearly 2 hours of driving. But he remained stuck in the same stretch of Route 52, passing the same landmarks in an endless cycle. Marcus tried something different. When he approached the oak tree for the 5th time, he suddenly cranked the steering wheel hard right, pulling completely off the highway onto the grass shoulder. He drove forward slowly, his headlights illuminating the trees beyond the roadside. Maybe if he stopped exactly at the tree, the loop would break. Maybe physical contact with one of the repeating landmarks would snap whatever bizarre phenomenon held him. He got within 20 feet of the oak tree when his headlights caught something that made his blood run cold. There, hanging from the same branch that extended over the highway, was a noose. It hadn't been there during the previous passes, or if it had been, he hadn't noticed it in the darkness. But now his headlights illuminated it clearly. A thick rope noose, swaying slightly in the night breeze. And beneath the noose, standing perfectly still in the grass beside the tree, was a figure, a man, dressed in dark clothing, his face obscured by shadow. The figure stood motionless, hands at his sides, watching Marcus's truck with an intensity that radiated even through the windshield and the distance between them. Marcus slammed the truck into reverse, his heart hammering. The air brake hissed as he released it. He backed up 20 yards, then swung the truck back onto the highway. He pressed the accelerator hard, pushing the truck up to 70 miles per hour, well above the safe speed for the curves ahead. He didn't care. He needed to get away from that tree, from that noose, from that watching figure. The highway blurred past. Marcus's eyes darted between the road ahead and his mirrors, expecting to see the figure somehow following, somehow appearing in his trailer's shadow. But he saw nothing except darkness and the occasional gleam of reflective road markers. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Marcus noticed something different. The landscape had changed. He was passing houses now, small ranches with porch lights glowing. He saw a 24-hour gas station up ahead, its fluorescent lights like a beacon of normalcy. The GPS showed he'd somehow jumped forward 35 miles, now approaching Princeton, West Virginia. Marcus pulled into the gas station and practically fell out of the cab. His legs were weak. His shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cool night air. He walked into the convenience store and grabbed a coffee, his hands shaking so badly he spilled some while pouring. The clerk, a young woman with tired eyes, watched him with concern. "You okay, sir? You look like you've seen a ghost." Marcus wanted to tell her everything, wanted to describe the impossible loop, the oak tree, the noose, the watching figure. But when he opened his mouth, all that came out was, "Just a long night, just a real long night." He checked his phone. Full signal. The time showed 2:47 a.m. He'd somehow lost nearly 3 hours. His GPS showed his truck's tracking history, and there was a gap, a straight line that jumped from Bluewell to Princeton with no recorded movement between them, as if his truck had simply teleported across 35 miles of mountain highway. Marcus finished his delivery in Columbus 2 days later. He drove back through West Virginia on his return route, but he deliberately avoided Route 52. He took Interstate 77 instead, adding an extra hour to his trip. He didn't care. Some roads weren't worth the risk, no matter how familiar they seemed. 3 months later, Marcus read a news article that made his stomach drop. A historical society in West Virginia had published records from the 1930s about a series of lynchings that occurred in the southern part of the state. One of them had taken place beside a lightning-damaged white oak tree along what was now Route 52, near Bluewell. A man named Samuel Guthrie had been hanged there in 1934 by a mob who accused him of theft. The article mentioned that family members had tied a yellow ribbon to the tree as a memorial marker, a tradition they'd maintained for decades. Marcus never drove Route 52 at night again. But sometimes, when he's heading through West Virginia on Interstate 77, he'll see the distant lights of cars on the parallel route, and he'll wonder if any of those drivers are trapped in that same endless loop, passing that same oak tree over and over, while a dark figure watches from the shadows below a swaying noose. He wonders if anyone else ever escaped. Story 2. The fuel that wasn't there. Rebecca Torres had been driving flatbed trucks through the Appalachian region for 12 years, specializing in hauling lumber and steel beams from mills to construction sites. She prided herself on meticulous preparation. She checked her load security 3 times before every departure. She maintained detailed fuel logs. She kept her 2018 Peterbilt 579 in pristine condition, with regular maintenance that went beyond the required inspections. Rebecca was the kind of driver other truckers respected, the kind who never cut corners or took unnecessary risks. On January 14, 2021, Rebecca was hauling a load of steel I-beams from a mill in Roanoke, Virginia, to a construction site in Lexington, Kentucky. The route would take her through the mountainous border region where Virginia, West Virginia, and Kentucky converged. It was winter, and the forecast predicted possible snow after midnight, but the roads were clear when she departed at 6:30 p.m. Her fuel tanks were full, giving her a range of approximately 1,200 miles before needing to refuel. The trip was roughly 300 miles, well within her comfort zone. Rebecca followed Route 460 west through Virginia as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Traffic was light, mostly other commercial vehicles making their evening runs. She maintained steady communication on her CB radio, exchanging weather updates and traffic information with other drivers. Everything was routine, comfortable, exactly as it should be. Around 9:45 p.m., Rebecca crossed into West Virginia near Peterstown. The temperature had dropped significantly, and a light freezing rain began to coat the windshield. She turned on her wipers and reduced her speed slightly, watching for ice on the road surface. Her fuel gauge showed 3/4 full, exactly what she expected after 120 miles of driving. Her GPS indicated she'd reach her planned overnight stop in Charleston in approximately 3 hours. That's when she noticed the sign, "Fuel next services 84 miles." Rebecca frowned. According to her maps and GPS, there should be multiple truck stops within the next 30 miles. She'd fueled at a Flying J in this area several times before, but the sign was official looking, a standard green highway service sign. Maybe their deep enclosures she hadn't heard about. She checked her fuel gauge again, 3/4 full. Even 84 miles wouldn't be a problem. She'd still have plenty of fuel remaining when she reached the next services. She continued driving through the darkness, the freezing rain intensifying into a steady sleet that clattered against the truck's hood and windshield. Visibility dropped to maybe 50 yards. Rebecca slowed to 45 miles per hour, her eyes locked on the white line marking the road's edge. The CB radio had gone quiet. No other drivers, no static, just silence. The darkness beyond her headlights seemed absolute, as if the world had shrunk to just the small sphere of illumination around her truck. After what felt like an hour of driving through the storm, Rebecca checked her odometer. She'd traveled 62 miles since seeing the next service's 84 miles sign. That meant she should be seeing another service sign soon, maybe announcing fuel in 20 miles or less. Her fuel gauge had dropped to just over half full, which seemed right for the distance traveled. Instead, she saw another sign flash past in her headlights. Fuel next service's 84 miles. The exact same sign. The exact same distance. Rebecca's hands tightened on the steering wheel. That couldn't be right. She'd just driven 62 miles. The next services should be much closer now, not still 84 miles away. She grabbed her phone to check her GPS, but the screen showed searching for signal. The GPS unit on her dashboard had frozen. The map display stuck on a screen showing no roads, just a gray background with her truck's blue location dot in the center. She continued driving, her unease growing with each passing mile. The sleet had thickened into wet, heavy snow that stuck to everything. Her wipers struggled to keep the windshield clear. The road had become a narrow tunnel of white, with no other vehicles, no buildings, no lights except her own headlights reflecting off the falling snow. Rebecca checked her fuel gauge and felt her stomach drop. The needle hovered just below the halfway mark. She'd now driven approximately 90 miles since first seeing the service sign. But the math didn't add up. If she'd driven 90 miles and started with 3/4 of a tank, her gauge should be reading somewhere around half full or slightly below, which it was. But if she'd driven 90 miles, she should have passed the services that were supposedly 84 miles away. Unless the sign had been accurate when she'd seen it the second time. Unless she somehow hadn't actually traveled those first 62 miles. The thought sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the winter storm. She keyed her CB radio. "Breaker, breaker, this is Steel Rose westbound on Route 460 in West Virginia. Anyone copy? Over." Nothing, not even static. The CB was completely dead despite showing power and all indicators functioning normally. Rebecca drove on, her eyes constantly flicking between the road and her fuel gauge. The needle continued its steady descent, 1/4 tank, then just above empty. She'd been driving for hours now, though her dashboard clock seemed to have stopped working, frozen at 11:17 p.m. Her phone was equally useless, the time display flickering between random numbers. When her fuel gauge touched the red E marking, Rebecca felt genuine panic set in. She'd driven what must have been 200 miles or more, burning through an entire tank of diesel. But where was she? The GPS was useless. The road signs had disappeared entirely. There were no mile markers, no town names, no indications of where this highway was leading. Just endless snow and darkness and the narrow corridor of road illuminated by her headlights. The engine sputtered. Rebecca's heart hammered in her chest. She was running on fumes now, maybe a few miles left at most. She'd have to stop soon, would have to sit in the cab while the cold crept in and hope someone found her before hypothermia set in. She'd been stupid. She should have stopped earlier, should have turned around, should have trusted her instincts when nothing made sense. The engine sputtered again, losing power. Rebecca guided the truck to the shoulder, or what she thought was the shoulder, the distinction between road and roadside erased by the heavy snow. She set the air brake and sat in the darkness, engine silent, the snow already beginning to pile up on her hood. She tried her phone again, still no signal. She tried the CB, still dead. She had emergency supplies in the sleeper cab, blankets and food and water, enough to last maybe 3 days if she was careful. But 3 days in this cold with no way to call for help, No way to let anyone know where she was. Rebecca was reaching for her emergency blanket when her headlights, which she'd left on despite the dead engine, illuminated a shape ahead in the snow. A building. No, not just a building. A truck stop. A massive, brightly lit truck stop with a dozen pumps and a restaurant and several trucks already parked in the lot. She sat staring at it for a long moment, unable to process what she was seeing. The building hadn't been there seconds ago. She was certain of that. She'd been looking straight ahead down an empty highway. But now there it was, lights blazing, looking warm and inviting and impossible. Rebecca tried to start her engine. The starter motor turned over once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th attempt, impossibly, the engine caught. The fuel gauge still read empty, but the engine was running smoothly as if it had plenty of fuel. Rebecca didn't question it. She put the truck in gear and crept forward through the snow toward the truck stop. As she got closer, she could read the sign, "Last Chance Fuel and Food." The parking lot held 6 or 7 trucks, all covered in snow as if they'd been parked for hours. Warm yellow light spilled from the restaurant windows. She could see figures moving inside, people eating, servers carrying plates. Rebecca parked and climbed down from the cab. The snow was nearly 6 inches deep and more was falling steadily. She trudged toward the restaurant entrance, her boots crunching in the fresh powder. The door had a small bell that jingled when she opened it. Warmth washed over her, and the smell of coffee and fried food. The restaurant was busy, maybe 20 people spread across various booths and tables. Truckers mostly, a few who looked like locals. A waitress with gray hair and a tired smile approached her. "Sit anywhere you'd like, honey. Coffee, please," Rebecca said, her voice hoarse. "And I need to fuel up, my truck's running on empty." The waitress nodded. "Pumps are 24-hour, help yourself. You want some food? Meatloaf's good tonight." Rebecca sat in a booth near the window where she could watch her truck. She drank the coffee the waitress brought, feeling the warmth spread through her body. She ordered the meatloaf, suddenly ravenous. While she waited for her food, she tried her phone again. Still no signal. But the clock had started working again, showing 2:34 a.m. She ate quickly, paid with cash when the waitress brought her check. The woman's hands were cold when she took the money, and Rebecca noticed that none of the other patrons seemed to be talking. They ate in silence, staring at their plates or out the windows. The only sounds were the clinking of silverware and the low hum of the heating system. Rebecca fueled her truck, the pump working normally despite her credit card reader showing an error message. She paid cash inside, the same gray-haired waitress handling the transaction at the register. Then she climbed back into her cab, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot onto the highway. The snow had stopped. The road was clear and dry, as if the storm had never happened. Rebecca's GPS suddenly flickered to life, showing her position near Charleston, West Virginia. She'd somehow jumped almost 100 miles from where she'd run out of fuel. The rest of her drive to Lexington was uneventful. She arrived at the construction site at 7:15 a.m., tired but otherwise fine. She didn't mention her experience to anyone. What would she say? That she'd driven 200 miles on an empty tank? That a truck stop had appeared out of nowhere in the middle of a blizzard? 2 weeks later, Rebecca tried to find the truck stop on her GPS. She wanted to send a thank you card to the gray-haired waitress, wanted some concrete proof that the place had been real. But there was nothing. No truck stop on Route 460 near where she'd run out of fuel. No business called Last Chance Fuel and Food anywhere in West Virginia. She searched satellite imagery, looked through truck stop directories, even called the West Virginia Department of Transportation. Nothing. The truck stop didn't exist. But Rebecca's fuel logs from that night showed something strange. She'd logged a full tank when departing Roanoke. Her next entry when she reached Lexington showed 3/4 of a tank remaining. She'd driven 300 miles and only burned through a quarter tank of fuel. Impossible with her truck's consumption rate. She should have needed to refuel at least once during the trip. Unless somehow, impossibly, the fuel she'd burned during those lost hours during that drive through the endless snow hadn't been real, unless that empty tank had been an illusion and the truck stop had filled something other than her diesel tank. Rebecca still drives Route 460 several times a month. She always fuels up before entering West Virginia now, always makes sure her tanks are completely full. She's never run low on fuel in the mountains again. She never wants to see that green sign telling her the next services are 84 miles away. And she never wants to find out what would have happened if she hadn't found that impossible truck stop, or what price she might have actually paid for fuel that wasn't there. Story 3. The Wrong Side of Mourning. Daniel Foster had been hauling refrigerated goods through the Appalachian Mountains for 23 years. His territory stretched from Pennsylvania down through West Virginia and Virginia, delivering meat, dairy, and produce to supermarkets and distribution centers. He knew every curve, every climb, every dangerous descent in the region. His 2020 Freightliner Cascadia with its temperature-controlled trailer was his second home. He'd driven well over 2 million miles without a single accident. On March 8, 2022, Daniel was making a routine delivery run from a dairy processing facility in State College, Pennsylvania, to a distribution center in Roanoke, Virginia. He departed at 3:00 a.m., his trailer loaded with 40,000 pounds of refrigerated dairy products that needed to reach Roanoke by 11:00 a.m. The route was approximately 300 miles, mostly following Interstate 99 south to I-68, then picking up various state highways through West Virginia before connecting to I-81 into Virginia. He'd made this exact run at least 200 times. The pre-dawn darkness was absolute as Daniel navigated the first leg of his journey. Stars dotted the sky above the mountains, and the air was crisp and cold, perfect conditions for driving. His trailer's refrigeration unit hummed steadily, maintaining the precise temperature needed for the dairy products. Everything was operating perfectly. Daniel sipped coffee from his thermos and listened to an audiobook about World War II history, content and comfortable in his routine. Around 5:30 a.m., as he was transitioning from I-68 onto Route 220 southbound, Daniel noticed the eastern sky beginning to lighten. Dawn was approaching, that gradual transformation from night to day that happened so slowly you could barely perceive the change moment by moment. But then suddenly the world was bright. He always enjoyed this part of the drive, watching the mountains emerge from darkness as the sun prepared to rise. But something was wrong with the light. It wasn't the normal gradual brightening of pre-dawn. Instead, the eastern sky was glowing with an odd greenish-yellow color, like nothing Daniel had ever seen before. It looked almost artificial, like stage lighting, and it was spreading too quickly. Within just a few minutes, the entire sky had taken on this strange, sickly hue. No sun appeared on the horizon. No normal dawn colors, no pinks or oranges. Just this wrong-colored brightness that made everything look diseased. Daniel slowed his truck, staring at the sky through his windshield. The light was bright enough now that he could see the landscape clearly, but nothing looked right. The colors were off. The trees alongside the highway appeared almost gray rather than green, as if all the natural color had been leached out of them. The road surface looked strange too, the normal black asphalt now seeming almost purple in the weird light. He grabbed his CB radio. "Breaker, breaker, this is Milk Run southbound on Route 220 near Cumberland. Anyone else seeing this sky, this light? Something's wrong out here. Over." A voice crackled back almost immediately. "Copy that, Milk Run. This is Silver Bullet northbound, about 20 miles south of your position." "What are you talking about? Sky looks normal to me. Clear morning, sun's coming up pretty. Over." Daniel stared at his radio, then at the sky. "Silver Bullet, you're telling me the sky looks normal, the light looks right to you. Over." "Affirmative, Milk Run. Beautiful sunrise happening right now. Maybe you need more coffee. Over and out." The radio went silent. Daniel looked at the sky again. The greenish-yellow light had brightened further, but still no sun appeared. It was as if the entire sky itself was glowing with this wrong-colored luminescence. He checked his clock. 5:47 a.m. Sunrise should be occurring right now. But wherever this light was coming from, it wasn't the sun. Daniel continued driving, unable to shake the growing sense that something fundamental had shifted. The landscape looked increasingly unfamiliar despite this being a route he'd driven countless times. The trees were the wrong species, or at least they looked wrong. He passed a farmhouse that shouldn't have been there, a dilapidated structure with broken windows and a collapsed barn. He'd never seen this property before. There should have been a small church with a white steeple in this location. His GPS showed him traveling along Route 220, his blue location dot moving steadily southward. But the map itself looked slightly different from usual. Roads appeared in places he didn't remember seeing them before. Town names looked unfamiliar. The GPS kept recalculating his route, the mechanical voice saying recalculating every few minutes for no apparent reason. At 6:15 a.m., Daniel saw a highway sign that made his blood run cold. Welcome to West Virginia, wild and wonderful. He'd already been in West Virginia for over an hour. He crossed the state line near the Maryland border back around 5:00 a.m. There was no way he should be seeing a Welcome to West Virginia sign now unless he'd somehow turned around or left the state and re-entered it. But he'd been driving straight south the entire time. He hadn't made any turns. He certainly hadn't driven in a circle large enough to leave and re-enter West Virginia. Daniel pulled over at a rest area just past the state line sign. He needed to reorient, needed to figure out what was happening. The rest area looked wrong too. It was newer than it should be, with fresh pavement and modern facilities. But he knew this rest area. It was supposed to be old, built in the 1970s with cracked concrete and outdated restrooms. This looked like it had been constructed within the last year. He climbed out of his cab. The air felt strange against his skin, too warm for early March in the mountains. It should have been maybe 40 degrees, cold enough to see his breath. Instead, it felt like 70 degrees, almost balmy. And the light, that horrible greenish-yellow light, made everything look like it was underwater, distorted and wrong. 2 other trucks were parked in the rest area. Daniel walked over to a Schneider rig where a driver was performing his pre-trip inspection. The man was checking his trailer tires, looking completely normal and unconcerned. "Excuse me," Daniel called out. "You notice anything weird about the light this morning?" The driver looked up, squinting at Daniel. "What do you mean?" "The sky. The color, this green-yellow light. You're seeing that, right?" The driver glanced at the sky, then back at Daniel with a confused expression. "Sky looks fine to me, brother. Normal sunrise. You feeling okay?" Daniel looked up at the sky himself. Still that horrible wrong-colored glow. No sun visible. "You're telling me that looks normal to you? That's what sunrise looks like." The driver's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Look, man, I don't know what you're seeing, but maybe you should take a break, get some rest. Sunrise looks completely normal to me." Daniel backed away, his heart pounding. He returned to his truck and sat in the cab, hands shaking. What was happening? Was he hallucinating? Was something wrong with his eyes, his brain? But everything felt real. He felt completely alert and clear-headed. This wasn't exhaustion or illness. Something had actually changed. He pulled out his phone to call his dispatcher to tell them he needed to stop, that something was wrong. But when he unlocked the screen, his breath caught in his throat. The date displayed was wrong. His phone showed March 8, 2022, which was correct. But the year underneath it read 2025, 3 years in the future. Daniel stared at the screen, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. He opened the phone's settings, checked the date and time configuration. Everything was set to automatic. The phone was pulling the date from the cell network. According to the network, it was March 8, 2025. He opened a web browser and searched for today's date. News articles loaded, all dated March 8, 2025. Headlines about events he didn't recognize, about political situations that made no sense, about technologies and companies he'd never heard of. He searched for his own name, some desperate attempt to find proof that this was real or proof that it was an hallucination. No results. Daniel Foster didn't appear in any news articles or public records from 2025, but when he searched for his own name plus 2022, he found something that made his chest tighten with genuine terror. A news article from October 2022, truck driver still missing 6 months after disappearance in West Virginia mountains. Clicked on the article. His own photograph stared back at him from the screen, a picture from his commercial driver's license. The article described how Daniel Foster, age 52, had disappeared on March 8, 2022, while making a routine delivery from Pennsylvania to Virginia. His truck had been found abandoned on Route 220 near a rest area, the refrigeration unit still running, the dairy products spoiled. No sign of the driver, no indication of foul play. He'd simply vanished. The article quoted his wife Sarah, pleading for information about his whereabouts. It mentioned their 2 daughters, Rachel and Jennifer, both heartbroken by their father's disappearance. It described how the investigation had gone cold, how authorities had no leads, how the family was offering a reward for information. Daniel's hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. This couldn't be real. He wasn't missing. He wasn't gone. He was right here, sitting in his truck 3 years in the future somehow, but he was here. He was alive. He tried to call Sarah. The number went straight to a message. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He tried calling his dispatcher, same message. He tried calling his oldest daughter, Rachel. This time the phone rang once, twice, 3 times, then a woman's voice, "Hello, Rachel, Rachel, it's Dad, it's your father." Silence on the other end. Then, "Who is this? This isn't funny." "Rachel, it's really me. It's Dad. I know this sounds crazy, but something happened. I'm in West Virginia and the date is wrong and stop it. My father is dead. He died 3 years ago. Whoever you are, don't call this number again." The line went dead. Daniel sat staring at his phone, tears streaming down his face. Dead. His daughter thought he was dead. 3 years missing, presumed dead, but he was here. He was alive. He'd only been driving for a few hours. How had 3 years passed? He looked out at the rest area. The other trucks were gone now. He was alone, parked under that horrible greenish-yellow sky that apparently only he could see. He started his engine. He had to get to Roanoke, had to complete his delivery, had to find some way back to his own time, to his family, to his life. But as he pulled back onto Route 220 and continued south, Daniel noticed his trailer's refrigeration unit had stopped. The dairy products, which had been fresh when he loaded them just a few hours ago in his time, were now 3 years old, spoiled, worthless. He drove through the rest of that strange morning, the sky never quite looking right, the landscape never quite matching his memories. His GPS guided him to the distribution center in Roanoke, but when he arrived, the building was different, newer, expanded. A sign out front read, "Renovated and reopened 2024. Daniel didn't stop. He kept driving, heading toward his home in Pennsylvania, desperate to see Sarah, to see his daughters, to find some way to prove he was real and alive. But a growing dread settled in his gut. The driver at the rest area couldn't see what Daniel saw in the sky. Rachel didn't believe it was him on the phone. According to all the evidence, Daniel Foster had disappeared 3 years ago. What if he hadn't moved forward in time? What if he'd moved sideways, into some parallel version of reality where he'd never arrived home on March 8, 2022? A reality where his family mourned his death, where his life had continued without him. Daniel never reached Pennsylvania. Somewhere along Interstate 81 in Virginia, as the green-yellow light finally began to fade and a normal-looking sun appeared in the sky, his truck vanished from sight of the other drivers on the highway. Security cameras at a toll booth captured his truck approaching, then simply not emerging from the other side. No crash, no debris, just there one moment, gone the next. The The truck and trailer were never found. Daniel Foster remains officially missing, his fate unknown. But sometimes, other drivers traveling through the Appalachian Mountains in the early morning hours report seeing a Freightliner Cascadia with refrigeration unit running, the driver visible through the window, looking terrified and lost. The truck appears for just a moment before vanishing, as if it's passing through this reality on its way to somewhere else. And those who see it say the sky, just for a second, takes on a strange greenish-yellow color that makes everything look wrong. Story 4. The Voice in the Static. James Whitmore had been driving long-haul trucks through Appalachia for 14 years, and he developed certain superstitions that he followed religiously. He always kept his CB radio on Channel 19, the standard trucker channel. He never picked up hitchhikers, no matter how desperate they looked. He avoided driving through fog banks if he could help it, and he never, ever responded to voices on the CB that asked for help without first confirming they were legitimate through the emergency channels. That last superstition came from a story an older driver had told him years ago about truckers who'd responded to distress calls only to find themselves lured off the highway into dangerous situations. James didn't know if the stories were true, but he wasn't willing to take the risk. The CB radio was for business communications and casual conversation with other drivers. That was it. On November 19, 2020, James was hauling a load of furniture from a warehouse in North Carolina to a retail distribution center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The route took him through the mountains of Virginia and West Virginia, a drive he'd made probably 50 times before. It was just after 1:00 a.m. when he crossed into West Virginia on Interstate 77 northbound. The night was clear and cold, with a crescent moon providing just enough light to silhouette the ridgelines against the star-filled sky. Traffic was light at this hour, just a few trucks and the occasional car. James had his CB radio on, volume set low. The usual late-night chatter filled the speaker, drivers complaining about traffic in Columbus, sharing information about way stations, warning each other about speed traps. James didn't participate in the conversation, preferring to focus on driving and listening to a podcast about unsolved mysteries. Around 2:15 a.m., as he was climbing a long grade about 30 miles south of Charleston, the CB radio crackled with interference. Not unusual in the mountains, where the terrain could disrupt signals. But then a voice cut through the static, clear and distinct despite the interference. "Breaker 19, this is requesting emergency assistance. My truck is disabled, I need help, over." James glanced at the CB radio but didn't reach for the microphone. The voice sounded wrong somehow, too clear despite the static, too calm for someone in an actual emergency. And there was something else, something he couldn't quite identify, that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Another voice responded, a different driver. "Copy that, what's your location, over. Mile marker 49 southbound. Engine failure. Please, I need assistance." Over. James checked his own position. He was at mile marker 51 northbound. Whoever this was claiming to need help was on the opposite side of the highway, just a couple miles behind him, but something still felt off. The voice was too calm, too measured. Real panic had a quality to it, a breathlessness and urgency that this voice lacked. The second driver responded, "Roger that, I'm about 5 miles north of your position. I'll turn around at the next exit and come help you out. Hang tight. Over." "Thank you, please hurry. Over." James frowned, his unease growing. He keyed his own microphone. "Breaker 19, this is Wolverine northbound at marker 51. To the driver heading to provide assistance, be careful. That call doesn't sound right. Recommend contacting Highway Patrol first. Over." The second driver's voice came back, sounding irritated. "Copy that, Wolverine, but the guy needs help. Can't just leave him stranded. Over. Just be careful, something doesn't feel right. Over." No response. James watched his mirrors, but he didn't see any trucks pulling over on the southbound side. He continued driving, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he just heard something that shouldn't have been on the radio. The voice requesting help had been too perfect, too scripted, not like a real person in genuine distress. 10 minutes later, the CB crackled again. The same voice. "Breaker 19, this is requesting emergency assistance. My truck is disabled. I need help. Over." The exact same words, the exact same intonation, identical to the first call. James immediately grabbed his microphone. "Breaker 19, this is Wolverine. To all drivers, that's the same message from 10 minutes ago. Word for word, do not respond, do not stop. This is not legitimate. Over." Silence on the CB. Then a different voice, older, with a distinctive accent. "Copy that, Wolverine. I heard that first call too. You're right. Same exact message. What the hell is going on?" Over. Before anyone could respond, the original voice came back, but this time it was different. The calm, measured tone was gone, replaced by something that made James's stomach drop. The voice was still clear, still cutting through the static, but now it sounded angry, inhuman. "You should have stopped, James. You should have helped." James's hands tightened on the steering wheel. The voice had used his name. His actual name, not his CB handle, but he'd never identified himself beyond his handle. There was no way this voice should know his real name. He didn't respond. He turned up the volume on his podcast, trying to drown out the CB, but the voice continued, cutting through the static, ignoring the other channels, somehow broadcasting directly to him. "We've been waiting for you, James Whitmore. Route 77, 2:37 a.m., mile marker 58. You're almost here." James looked at his dashboard clock, 2:36 a.m. His GPS showed him approaching mile marker 58. His chest tightened. Whatever this was, whatever was speaking through his CB radio, it knew where he was. It knew his position in real time. Other voices erupted on the CB now, other drivers who'd heard the strange transmission. What the fuck was that? Did anyone else hear that? Someone's playing games on the radio. But underneath all the normal voices, James could still hear that other voice, the wrong voice, speaking directly to him through the static. "We see your lights, James, your truck, your trailer loaded with furniture. North Carolina to Pittsburgh, you're scared, we can feel it." James grabbed the CB microphone with a shaking hand. "Who are you? What do you want?" The response came immediately, the voice now sounding pleased. "You acknowledged us. Thank you, James. Most don't, most ignore us. But you heard, you listened. You responded. I'm calling the police, I'm reporting this." "Police can't help you, James. You're in our territory now. Mile marker 60, do you see us?" James's eyes darted to the roadside. His headlights illuminated the shoulder, the guard rail, the trees beyond. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. Just a normal stretch of interstate highway climbing through the mountains in the middle of the night. Then he saw them. 3 figures standing on the shoulder, just outside the reach of his headlights. Human-shaped, but something about their proportions was wrong. Too tall, too thin. They stood perfectly still, facing the highway, watching the traffic pass. James pressed the accelerator, pushing his truck harder up the grade. His speedometer climbed to 70 miles per hour, faster than was safe on this incline, but he didn't care. He needed distance, needed to get away from those figures. The voice continued, now sounding amused. "You can't outrun us, James. We're in the radio, in the static. In the spaces between the signals, we're everywhere these signals reach." James looked at his CB radio. The power light glowed green. The channel indicator showed 19. Every display was normal, but the voice kept coming through underneath and between the normal traffic like it was being broadcast from somewhere else entirely. "Turn off the radio," James muttered to himself. "Just turn it off." His hand reached for the power button. But before he could press it, every other radio in his truck activated simultaneously. His FM radio, his weather band, his satellite radio, all of them, despite being turned off, suddenly blared to life with deafening static. And through that static, from every speaker in the cab, the voice spoke. "We don't need your CB radio, James. We're in all of them, all the signals, all the frequencies. You can't escape us by turning off one radio." James fought down panic. He was approaching mile marker 65 now, driving as fast as his loaded truck could safely manage. The voices from the radios filled the cab with chaotic noise, static and interference, and underneath it all, that clear, wrong voice speaking his name over and over. Then, abruptly, all the radios went silent. Complete quiet. Even the normal road noise seemed muffled, as if James was suddenly underwater. He could see his mirrors vibrating, could feel the engine's vibration through the steering wheel. But he couldn't hear anything except his own breathing and heartbeat. The CB radio speaker crackled once. Then the voice spoke again, but now it sounded different. Multiple voices overlapping, speaking in unison. "We were truckers once, James, like you. We drove these roads, these mountains, until we heard the voices, until we stopped to help, until we became part of the static." James's throat was so dry he could barely speak. "What happened to you?" "We disappeared. One by one. Over years. Decades, different times, different trucks, but the same roads. The same calls for help. We stopped. We responded. And now we're here in the spaces between signals, calling for others, calling for you. I didn't stop. I didn't help. But you responded. You acknowledged us. You heard our voice and you answered. That's enough. That's the first step. Now you're connected." The CB radio's display began to flicker, numbers and letters scrolling across the screen in random patterns. James's GPS started glitching too, the map fragmenting into impossible geometries, roads overlapping and twisting in ways that made his eyes hurt to look at. "You'll hear us now, James. Everywhere you drive, every radio, every signal, will be there in the static, calling to you. And eventually you'll stop. You'll come to help. You all do eventually. The voice becomes too much to ignore." James ripped the CB radio from its mount, the wiring sparking as it came free. He threw it into the passenger seat. But the voices continued, now coming from his phone, from his electronic logbook display, from every piece of electronic equipment in the cab. "You can't silence us by destroying the radios, James. We're in the signals themselves, in the electromagnetic waves that fill these mountains. As long as you're here, you'll hear us." James saw an exit sign ahead. Next exit, 3 miles services, gas, food, lodging. He didn't care where the exit led. He just needed to get off this highway, away from the voices, away from whatever impossible thing was speaking to him through every electronic device in his truck. He took the exit at 60 miles per hour, the trailer swaying dangerously behind him. The ramp curved down off the interstate toward what looked like a small town nestled in the valley below. Streetlights dotted the darkness. James could see a gas station, a diner, a small motel. Normal, safe, real. As he descended the ramp, the voices began to fade. First, the phone went silent. Then the logbook display returned to normal. By the time he reached the bottom of the ramp and turned onto the 2-lane road leading to the town, all his electronics had returned to normal function. Complete silence from the radios. James pulled into the gas station and killed the engine. His hands were shaking. His shirt was soaked with sweat. He sat in the darkness of the cab, listening to the tick of the cooling engine, afraid to turn on any electronic device. He spent the rest of the night in the motel, lying awake, staring at the ceiling. When dawn came, he called his dispatcher and told them he was sick, needed a day off. They weren't happy, but they agreed to find another driver to complete the delivery. James drove home to North Carolina on back roads, avoiding the interstate entirely. Every time a radio crackled or his phone chirped with a notification, his heart would race. But the voices didn't return. Whatever had spoken to him on Interstate 77 seemed to have stayed there, trapped in that stretch of highway in those particular frequencies. He quit trucking a month later, took a job at a warehouse driving a forklift, something that kept him off the highways, away from the long, lonely stretches through the mountains. But sometimes, late at night when he can't sleep, he'll turn on a radio and scan through the static between stations. And sometimes he hears it, that voice, those voices calling out for help, using different names now, calling for other drivers. James recognizes the tone, the measured calm that sounds wrong, the script that repeats word for word. He's kept a list of the names he's heard in the static, 43 of them so far. He searched online for each name, looking for news articles, missing person reports. He's found matches for 17 of them, all truck drivers. All disappeared in West Virginia or Virginia on stretches of highway through the Appalachian Mountains. Some vanished decades ago, some as recently as last year. All of them were last reported on Interstate 77, responding to CB radio calls for emergency assistance, stopping to help stranded drivers who were never found. James knows he should report this information to authorities, should try to warn other drivers, but who would believe him? And what would he say? That there are voices in the radio static that lure truckers off the highway, that disappeared drivers are somehow broadcasting from the spaces between signals, so he keeps his list. He monitors the CB radio frequencies when he can't sleep, and he adds new names when he hears them. 44 now, 45, 46. The voices are still calling, still asking for help, still waiting for someone to respond. And James knows that somewhere out there a driver will hear that call, will respond, will stop to help. And then there will be one more voice in the static. Story 5, the road that goes nowhere. Patricia Delgado had been driving tanker trucks through the Appalachian region for 9 years, specializing in hauling fuel and industrial chemicals. It was dangerous work, requiring constant vigilance and perfect safety records. Patricia took pride in her flawless record: 0 accidents, 0 violations, 0 close calls. She treated every mile like a test she had to pass perfectly. On June 12, 2023, Patricia was hauling a load of diesel fuel from a terminal in Charleston, West Virginia, to a distribution center near Roanoke, Virginia. The route was straightforward, primarily following Interstate 64 east before connecting to smaller state highways. She departed at 4:30 p.m., expecting to reach her destination by 9:00 p.m., well before her hours of service limits. The weather was perfect, clear and mild, with visibility excellent in all directions. Patricia followed I-64 east out of Charleston, her tanker truck handling smoothly, the load properly balanced and secured. Traffic was moderate, mostly commuters heading home from work. Everything was routine, exactly as she'd driven this route dozens of times before. She maintained steady communication on her CB radio with other drivers, exchanging the usual information about traffic conditions and road construction. Around 6:45 p.m., as the sun was beginning to lower toward the western horizon, Patricia approached her planned exit from I-64 onto Route 60. This was the transition point where she'd leave the interstate and follow a 2-lane state highway through the mountains toward Virginia. She made this same exit countless times. Simple, straightforward, impossible to miss. But when she reached the location where the exit should be, there was nothing. No exit ramp, no sign, just the interstate continuing straight ahead through the mountains. Patricia frowned, checking her GPS. The map clearly showed the Route 60 exit at this location. Her GPS was telling her to exit, the voice saying take the exit on the right. But there was no exit, just unbroken guardrail and trees beyond the shoulder. She continued driving, assuming she'd somehow missed the exit despite watching for it carefully. The next exit would be about 15 miles ahead and she could double back from there. Not ideal, would cost her 30 minutes, but better than stopping on the interstate shoulder to check her maps. Patricia keyed her CB radio. Breaker 19, this is Tanker Queen eastbound on I-64. Did anyone else just pass the Route 60 exit? I think I missed it somehow. Over. A voice responded almost immediately. Copy that, Tanker Queen. This is Blue Flame, about 5 miles behind you. I'm heading for that same exit. I'll let you know when I reach it. Over. Appreciate it, Blue Flame. Over. Patricia continued driving, watching for the next exit, but after 20 miles, no exit had appeared. The interstate just continued, cutting through the mountains, mile after mile of identical guardrail and forest. No exits. No rest areas, no service areas. Nothing but the continuous highway stretching ahead. Her GPS had gone haywire. The map display now showed her position in the middle of a blank gray area with no roads, no towns, no landmarks. Just the blue dot representing her truck moving through empty space. The device kept recalculating, the voice saying recalculating route every few seconds. The CB radio crackled. "Tanker Queen, this is Blue Flame. Something weird is happening." I reach where the Route 60 exit should be, and there's nothing there. No ramp, no sign, just like you said, over. Patricia's stomach tight. "Copy that, Blue Flame, my GPS is going crazy too. I've been driving for 20 miles since the exit should have been, and I haven't seen any other exits either, over." "Same here, and Tanker Queen, there's something else. There's no other traffic, look around. How many other vehicles do you see? Over." Patricia checked her mirrors. The highway behind her was empty. She looked ahead. Nothing. Not a single vehicle in either direction. The interstate was completely deserted, but that was impossible. Even at odd hours, I-64 through West Virginia had regular traffic. She should be seeing cars, trucks, other commercial vehicles. But the highway stretched empty in both directions, like she and Blue Flame were the only two vehicles in existence. "Blue Flame, you're right. I don't see anyone. Where did all the traffic go? Over." "I don't know, but I'm going to try exiting at the next ramp I see, whatever it is. I don't care where it goes. I want off this highway. Over." "Understood. Keep me posted. Over." Patricia drove for another 30 miles. No exits appeared, no mile markers, no signs of any kind. Just the endless interstate cutting through the forested mountains, the pavement perfect and smooth, the lanes clearly marked but leading nowhere. The sun had set now, and darkness was falling rapidly. Her headlights illuminated the road ahead, but beyond the reach of her lights, the world was absolute black. No lights from towns, no glow from distant buildings, just darkness. The CB crackled. "Tanker Queen, this is Blue Flame. I think I'm going to pull over. This doesn't make sense. We should have seen multiple exits by now. Something's wrong with this highway. Over." "Don't pull over," Patricia said, her voice sharp. "If something's wrong with the road, stopping might make it worse. Just keep moving. We have to find an exit eventually. Over." But even as she said it, Patricia wasn't sure she believed it. How long had they been driving now? She checked her dashboard clock. 8:23 p.m. Nearly 4 hours since she'd left Charleston. At highway speeds, she should have traveled well over 200 miles. She should be in Virginia by now. But her surroundings looked exactly like the mountains of West Virginia, and according to her GPS, she was nowhere at all. Patricia's fuel gauge showed 3/4 full, which made sense for the distance traveled. But where had she traveled to? If she'd actually covered 200 miles, she'd be far east of Roanoke by now. But the landscape hadn't changed. The mountains looked the same. The trees looked the same. Even the guard rails looked the same, as if she'd been driving through one infinitely repeating section of highway. The CB remained silent for a long time. Patricia tried calling out to Blue Flame several times but received no response. Had he pulled over despite her warning? Had something happened to him? Or had the highway somehow separated them, sending them down different versions of the same road? At 9:15 p.m., Patricia's headlights finally illuminated something different. A sign, "Rest Area 1 mile." Relief flooded through her. A rest area meant exits, meant services, meant some kind of landmark she could use to orient herself. She maintained her speed, watching for the rest area to appear. After exactly 1 mile, according to her odometer, she saw the exit ramp, clearly marked and well lit. She took it, slowing as she descended from the highway into the rest area parking lot. The rest area looked modern and well maintained, with bright lights illuminating clean facilities and a large parking lot. But it was completely empty. No cars, no trucks, no people. Patricia parked and climbed down from her cab, her legs stiff from hours of driving. The air felt wrong, too still. No breeze, no sound of insects, no distant traffic noise. Just absolute silence pressing in from all sides. Patricia walked toward the restroom building, her footsteps echoing unnaturally loud on the pavement. That's when she noticed the sign near the entrance to the building. Welcome to I-64 Rest Area. Opened May 15, 2023. Last month. This rest area had opened just last month, but Patricia knew every rest area on this stretch of I-64, and there hadn't been any new construction. No announcement of new facilities. This rest area shouldn't exist. She approached the building carefully. Through the large windows, she could see clean, modern restrooms, vending machines, information displays. Everything looked normal except for the complete absence of people. Not even a maintenance worker. Patricia pushed open the door and stepped inside. The lights were on, bright fluorescents that hummed softly. The vending machines were stocked, their displays glowing. The water fountains were running. But the building felt empty in a way that went beyond just lack of people. It felt hollow, like a movie set, a facade designed to look real but with nothing behind it. She approached one of the vending machines and tried to buy a bottle of water. She inserted a dollar bill. The machine accepted it, the bill disappearing into the slot, but nothing happened. No bottle dropped. No change returned. The machine just hummed softly, the display showing "Make selection," but refusing to actually vend anything. Patricia tried the other vending machines with the same result. They took her money but gave nothing in return. The information displays on the walls showed maps of West Virginia with the rest area location marked. But when Patricia tried to find nearby towns or landmarks, every name on the map was gibberish. Random letters arranged in word-like patterns but not actual words. KLMF-Ton, Breezeville, Mount Park. She pulled out her phone. No signal. Her GPS app showed the same blank gray space, her location dot sitting in the middle of nothing. She tried to call her dispatcher. The phone made dial tones but no ring. Just silence, then a click, then disconnect. Patricia returned to her truck. She needed to get back on the highway, needed to find a real exit that led to a real town with real people. This rest area was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. She started her engine and prepared to pull back onto the interstate. That's when she saw the other truck. A blue Peterbilt with a flatbed trailer, parked in the far corner of the rest area parking lot. It hadn't been there when Patricia arrived. She was certain of that. She de-scanned the entire lot, noted the complete absence of other vehicles, but now there it was, parked in the shadows away from the main lights. Patricia drove slowly across the parking lot toward the blue Peterbilt. As she got closer, she could see the driver still sitting in the cab, a dark silhouette visible through the windshield. Patricia stopped her truck and climbed down. She approached the blue Peterbilt cautiously. "Hello," she called out. "Are you okay?" The figure in the cab didn't respond, didn't move, just sat there facing forward, hands on the steering wheel. Patricia got closer, her unease growing with each step. When she was close enough to see through the windshield clearly, her breath caught in her throat. The driver was gone. What she'd thought was a person was just a jacket draped over the seat back, positioned to look like someone sitting behind the wheel. She stepped back, her heart pounding. Then she saw the logo on the truck's door, Blue Flame Transport. This was Blue Flame's truck, the driver who'd been communicating with her on the CB radio. But where was he? Why was his truck here, parked in this impossible rest area, with his jacket arranged to look like someone still sitting in the driver's seat? Patricia ran back to her own truck. She didn't bother with seat belts or safety checks. She just started the engine and floored the accelerator, rocketing out of the parking lot toward the ramp back to the interstate. The tires screeched as she took the turn too fast, the tanker swaying dangerously behind her. She merged back onto I-64, heading east again, pushing her speed to 75 miles per hour. The empty highway stretched ahead, no other vehicles, no lights, just the endless black ribbon cutting through the darkness. Patricia's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her fingers went numb. At 10:47 p.m., Patricia's headlights illuminated a sign, Virginia State Line 2 miles. She almost sobbed with relief. Virginia. She was almost to Virginia. Once she crossed the state line, she'd be out of West Virginia, out of whatever strange stretch of highway she'd been trapped on for the past 6 hours. 2 more miles and she'd be safe. She covered those 2 miles in less than 2 minutes, her truck flying through the darkness. And then she saw it, the Welcome to Virginia sign flashing past in her headlights. She made it. She crossed the state line. But as she passed the sign, Patricia noticed something that made her stomach drop. Behind the Virginia Welcome sign, visible in her mirrors for just a moment, was another sign facing the opposite direction. The sign that should have said, "Welcome to West Virginia" for westbound traffic. Instead, it said, "You can't leave," Patricia screamed. She pressed the accelerator harder, pushing her tanker truck to 80 miles per hour, faster than was safe with the heavy load she was carrying. She didn't care. She needed distance, needed to get away from that sign, from that message that couldn't be real. The highway ahead began to curve. Sharp curves, switchbacks, the kind of road geometry that didn't exist on interstate highways. But I-64 was now twisting through the mountains like a mountain road, the curves so tight Patricia had to slow down or risk jackknifing the tanker. And then in her headlights she saw it. The sign, "Rest Area 1 mile." No, not the rest area again. She left it behind. She'd driven for an hour after leaving it. She crossed into Virginia, but there was the sign, identical to the one she'd seen before. Patricia slowed down, and after exactly 1 mile, she saw the rest area exit. The same rest area, the same building, the same lights, and parked in the same spot in the far corner of the lot, the blue Peterbilt with blue flames jacket draped over the seat. She'd driven in a circle. Despite heading east the entire time, despite crossing the state line, despite covering at least 60 miles, she'd somehow returned to the exact same rest area she'd fled from. Patricia sat in her truck at the entrance to the rest area, engine idling, tears streaming down her face. The highway behind her stretched empty into the darkness. The highway ahead, past the rest area, led back onto I-64, back onto the same endless loop that had brought her back here. She was trapped. This stretch of highway didn't lead anywhere. It just looped back on itself, an impossible Möbius strip of pavement that always returned to this rest area, this hollow facade of a place that shouldn't exist. Patricia picked up her CB microphone one more time. "Breaker 19, this is Tanker Queen. If anyone can hear me, I'm stuck on I-64 in West Virginia. The road doesn't go anywhere. It just loops back on itself. The exits are gone. Please, if anyone can hear me, send help. Tell someone I'm here." "Tell them," a voice cut through the static, a voice she recognized, Blue Flame. "You can't leave, Tanker Queen. None of us can. The road only goes in circles now. We're all here driving the same loop, over and over, forever." Patricia looked in her mirrors. Behind her, headlights appeared in the darkness, a truck approaching from the direction she'd just come from. As it got closer, she recognized the blue Peterbilt, Blue Flame's truck, but she could see into the cab now, and there was someone behind the wheel. A man, his face pale and drawn, his eyes hollow. The blue Peterbilt drove past Patricia and pulled into the rest area, parking in the same spot it had occupied before. The driver climbed out, moving mechanically like a puppet on strings. He was wearing the jacket Patricia had seen draped over the seat. He walked toward the restroom building with slow, measured steps, then disappeared inside. Patricia's CB crackled. Blue Flame's voice. "Eventually you'll need fuel. Eventually you'll need rest. Eventually you'll park and you'll walk into the building and you'll become part of it. Part of the rest area, part of the road, like I did, like all the others did. There are 17 of us now, 18 once you join." Patricia looked toward the rest area building. Through the windows, she could now see figures moving inside, not maintenance workers, not travelers, people who walked with that same mechanical gait, moving back and forth in endless patterns, maintaining the facade of a rest area that served no one. She put her truck in gear. She'd drive the loop again. Maybe this time she'd find a way out. Maybe this time the highway would lead somewhere real. She'd drive all night if she had to. All week, all month, she wouldn't stop, wouldn't park, wouldn't become one of those hollow figures maintaining an impossible rest area on a road that went nowhere. Patricia Delgado's truck was found abandoned at a rest area on I-64 in West Virginia 3 days later. The tanker still had half a tank of diesel fuel. The keys were in the ignition. The CB radio was on, stuck on channel 19, broadcasting only static. Patricia herself was nowhere to be found. But sometimes, late at night, truckers traveling I-64 through West Virginia report strange things. They see a rest area that wasn't there before, modern and well-lit but completely empty. They hear voices on their CB radios, other drivers claiming to be stuck on a highway that loops back on itself. And occasionally, someone will report seeing a tanker truck with a female driver, her face pale and drawn, her eyes hollow, driving past them at high speed before vanishing into the darkness. The Highway Patrol has investigated the reports. They've found nothing unusual. I-64 through West Virginia is a normal interstate with normal exits and normal rest areas. But the reports keep coming. Drivers who swear they've seen that impossible rest area. Drivers who have heard voices claiming to be trapped on a road that goes nowhere. And every few years, another truck is found abandoned, parked at a rest area with no explanation for why the driver disappeared. The trucks are always in perfect condition. The loads are always secure. The drivers are just gone. The state has stopped investigating. They've labeled it a coincidence, a statistical anomaly. Truckers are under stress. Sometimes they walk away. Sometimes they decide they've had enough and just leave. But the other drivers know better. They know there's a stretch of I-64 that doesn't follow normal geography, a road that sometimes appears and sometimes doesn't, a loop that catches drivers and holds them, forcing them to drive in circles until they can't resist anymore, until they park, until they join the others maintaining that hollow facade of a rest area on a highway that goes nowhere. And they know that any one of them could be next. Story 6. The Fog That Remembers. Thomas Bell had been driving box trucks for regional deliveries through the Appalachian Mountains for 16 years. His route covered western Virginia, eastern Kentucky, and southern West Virginia, delivering appliances and electronics to retail stores in small mountain towns. He knew every back road, every shortcut, every way to shave 15 minutes off a delivery schedule. His company valued him for his reliability and his ability to navigate the region's challenging terrain regardless of weather conditions. On September 3, 2021, Thomas was making a delivery run from a warehouse in Lexington, Kentucky, to an appliance store in Beckley, West Virginia. He was driving a 26-foot straight truck loaded with refrigerators and washing machines. The route would take him through the mountains on a series of 2-lane state highways that twisted through the hills like tangled rope. Thomas had driven this exact route at least 100 times. He could practically do it blindfolded. He departed Lexington at 5:00 a.m., planning to reach Beckley by 2:00 p.m., accounting for the slow mountain roads and a lunch break. The early morning was clear and cool, perfect conditions for driving. Thomas made good time through Kentucky, crossing into West Virginia around 8:30 a.m. near the town of Louisa. The roads were mostly empty at this hour, just a few local commuters and the occasional coal truck. Around 10:15 a.m., as Thomas was following Route 119 through a particularly isolated stretch of mountains, he drove into fog. This wasn't unusual. Morning fog in the Appalachian valleys was common, especially in early autumn. The fog would burn off by noon as the sun climbed higher. Thomas slowed down, turned on his headlights, and continued driving cautiously through the white haze. But after 15 minutes, the fog hadn't thinned at all. If anything, it had gotten thicker, reducing visibility to maybe 20 feet. Thomas slowed further, following the white line on the road's edge, his eyes straining to see through the dense mist. The fog had an odd quality to it, almost yellowish rather than pure white, and it seemed to move in strange patterns, swirling around the truck as if it was alive. Thomas passed a road sign, but the fog was so thick he couldn't read what it said. Just a green rectangular shape in the mist. He continued driving, his speed down to 25 miles per hour now. At this rate, he'd be late for his delivery, but there was no help for it. Driving faster in these conditions would be suicidal. After another 20 minutes of crawling through the fog, Thomas noticed something strange. He should have reached the town of Man, West Virginia by now. It was a small town, but it sat right on Route 119. He'd have to drive through it, would see buildings and traffic lights even through fog. But there was nothing. Just the road and the fog and the forest on either side. Thomas pulled over onto the shoulder and checked his maps. According to his GPS, he should be in the middle of Man right now. But he was clearly still on a rural highway surrounded by forest. No buildings, no signs of civilization, nothing but trees and fog. He tried his cell phone, no signal. That wasn't entirely unusual in the mountains, but Man was a decent-sized town. There should be cell coverage. Thomas sat for a moment, considering his options. He could turn around, head back until he was out of the fog, try to figure out where he'd gotten off track. But the fog had closed in behind him, and he couldn't see more than 20 feet in any direction. Trying to turn around a 26-foot truck on a narrow mountain road in zero visibility seemed like a terrible idea. He continued forward, hoping the fog would lift soon. But after another hour of driving, the fog remained just as thick. Thomas's unease was growing into genuine concern. He'd been driving for nearly 2 hours in fog that should have burned off within minutes of the sun rising higher. His fuel gauge showed he'd burned through the expected amount of gas, but he seemed to have made no actual progress. Every mile of highway looked exactly like the last. Then Thomas saw a figure standing beside the road. He slammed on the brakes, his truck shuddering to a stop. Through the fog, barely visible, was a person standing on the shoulder, facing the highway. Thomas couldn't make out any details, just a human-shaped silhouette in the mist. He rolled down his window. "Hello, are you okay? Do you need help?" The figure didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, a motionless shadow in the fog. Thomas felt his skin crawl. Something about that figure was deeply wrong. The complete stillness. The way it seemed to be watching the truck despite Thomas being unable to see any features. He put the truck back in gear and accelerated slowly past the figure, his eyes locked on it until the fog swallowed it again. A minute later, he saw another figure. Same position beside the road, same motionless stance. Thomas didn't slow down this time. He drove past, his heart pounding, his hands gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. More figures appeared, one every few hundred yards, all standing beside the road, all facing the highway, all perfectly still. Thomas counted 17 of them before he stopped counting, too focused on driving, too scared to keep track of the silent watchers in the fog. The CB radio crackled suddenly, making Thomas jump. A voice spoke through the static. "You shouldn't be here." Thomas grabbed the microphone. "Who is this? Where am I? I've been driving in fog for over 2 hours." "The fog remembers," the voice said. No emotion, no inflection, just a flat statement of fact. Everyone who died on these roads, every accident, every crash, the fog remembers them all. What are you talking about? The figures you're seeing, they're memories, echoes of people who died here. The fog holds them, shows them to travelers. Some see 1 or 2, you're seeing many. That means you're deep in it, deep in the fog's memory. Thomas's mouth was dry. "How do I get out?" "Most don't. The fog keeps them, adds them to its collection, but some have escaped. They say you have to remember too. Remember something strong enough to pull you back to the real world, a memory that anchors you." The radio went dead. Thomas tried calling back but received only static in response. He drove on, the figures continuing to appear beside the road, a procession of silent watchers marking his passage through the fog. Thomas tried to focus on the voice's advice. Remember something strong. He thought about his wife Lisa, about their home in Kentucky, about his 2 sons. He pictured their faces, tried to hold those images in his mind while he drove. But the fog seemed to press against his consciousness, making it hard to concentrate, hard to remember clearly. Then the figures beside the road changed. They were no longer just standing. Now they were moving, turning their heads to watch Thomas's truck as it passed. Some raised their arms as if trying to flag him down. Others began walking toward the road, their movements slow and jerky, like old film running at the wrong speed. Thomas pressed the accelerator, pushing his truck faster despite the poor visibility. He couldn't let those figures reach the road, couldn't let them get close to his truck. Some primitive part of his brain was screaming at him that if they touched his vehicle, something terrible would happen. A figure lurched into the road directly ahead of him. Thomas swerved, his truck veering into the oncoming lane. He felt the right side tires leave the pavement, felt the truck tilting dangerously. He wrestled it back onto the road, overcorrecting, the whole vehicle swaying wildly. Somehow he managed to straighten out without flipping or sliding off the road entirely. More figures were in the road now, walking into his path, standing motionless in the center of the highway. Thomas weaved between them, his heart hammering, his breath coming in short gasps. The fog was alive with movement now, shapes forming and dissolving, reaching toward the truck with arms that weren't quite solid. Then Thomas saw something else. A light ahead in the fog, orange and warm, a streetlight, then another and another, a line of streetlights emerging from the mist. Buildings appeared beside the road, a gas station, a small grocery store, a church with a white steeple. Thomas was driving through a town, not man but some other town. The fog was thinning rapidly now, the buildings becoming clearer. He could see cars parked on the street, people walking on the sidewalk, normal, real, solid. The fog lifted completely as if someone had drawn back a curtain. Thomas found himself driving through the town of Beckley, West Virginia, his destination. But according to his dashboard clock, it was 4:47 p.m. He'd been driving for nearly 7 hours since entering the fog. His fuel tank was nearly empty, confirming he'd driven the expected distance. But where had he been for all those hours? The drive from Louisa to Beckley should have taken maybe 4 hours, not 7. Thomas pulled into a parking lot and sat shaking in the cab. He checked his phone, full signal. The date and time were correct. Everything seemed normal. But he'd lost 3 hours in that fog, driving past figures that shouldn't exist, seeing things that couldn't be real. He called his dispatcher and claimed mechanical problems had delayed him. No point trying to explain what had actually happened. They wouldn't believe him. He barely believed it himself. Thomas made his delivery, though the store manager was annoyed by the late arrival. Thomas apologized and left as quickly as he could. He drove back to Kentucky on the interstate, avoiding the mountain-back roads entirely despite it adding 2 hours to his return trip. That night, unable to sleep, Thomas searched online for information about Route 119 in West Virginia. He found news articles about accidents, dozens of them over the decades, fatal crashes, vehicles sliding off the mountain roads, head-on collisions, single vehicle accidents where drivers seemingly lost control for no reason. The death toll was staggering. Hundreds of people had died on that stretch of highway over the years. One article from 2003 caught his attention. It described a persistent fog that appeared in the area several times a year, particularly in autumn. Local residents claimed the fog was dangerous, that it caused hallucinations and disorientation. Several people had reported seeing figures in the fog, shadowy forms that watched from the roadside. State authorities had investigated but found nothing unusual. The fog was normal morning fog, they said. The reports of figures were just people's imaginations working overtime in poor visibility. But Thomas knew what he'd seen. Those weren't hallucinations. The figures had been real as anything else in that impossible fog. And the voice on the CB radio had been right. The fog remembered. It held some kind of record of everyone who died on those roads, and when it appeared, those memories became visible, walking beside the highway, watching the living pass by. Thomas never drove Route 119 through West Virginia again. He requested route changes from his company, claimed the mountain roads were aggravating his back problems. They agreed and assigned him different territories. He avoided West Virginia entirely if possible, and when he had to drive through the state, he stuck to major highways. But sometimes on foggy mornings, Thomas will see something in his peripheral vision. A figure standing beside the road, motionless, watching. He'll blink and it will be gone, just a trick of the light, a tree or road sign that looked human-shaped for a moment. But his heart will pound anyway, and he'll remember that fog, those hours lost in the mist, those silent watchers marking his passage through their remembered deaths. And Thomas knows that somewhere in the mountains of West Virginia, that fog still appears, still holds its memories, still shows those shadowy figures to travelers unlucky enough to drive into it. He knows other drivers have seen what he saw, have lost hours in that impossible mist. Most of them probably make it through like he did. They emerge on the other side confused and shaken but alive. But Thomas has read about the others, the ones who entered that fog and never came out, the abandoned vehicles found on the side of the road, the drivers who disappeared without trace. He wonders if those people are still in the fog somehow, still driving through those endless hours, still seeing those watching figures beside the road. He wonders if eventually the fog keeps everyone it touches. If his escape was temporary and someday he'll drive into morning mist that will thicken and yellow and refuse to lift. And he'll join those others, the ones who became part of the fog's memory. Another figure standing beside the road. Another shadow watching travelers pass. Another death that the fog remembers. Story 7. The Town Thatmoved. Angela Morrison had been driving delivery vans through rural Appalachia for 11 years, working for a regional courier service that handled packages for areas too remote for the major shipping companies. Her territory covered a patchwork of tiny towns scattered through the mountains of eastern Kentucky and southern West Virginia. She knew every community, every general store, every post office in her region. She took pride in providing reliable service to people who lived far from major cities. On April 17, 2022, Angela was making her usual Monday run through eastern Kentucky, a circuit that would take her through 15 small towns before returning to the depot in Pikeville by 6:00 p.m. She drove a Ford Transit van loaded with packages ranging from Amazon orders to prescription medications. The day was overcast but dry, with temperatures in the mid-50s, perfect for driving. Angela's route was clockwork. She de-perfected it over years, knowing exactly how long each leg would take, where she'd stop for lunch, which roads had the worst potholes. Her 10th stop of the day was a town called Marlow, population maybe 200 people, consisting of a general store, a post office, a small church, and about 40 houses clustered around a T intersection where County Road 15 met County Road 22. She delivered packages to Marlow every week for the past 11 years. The general store was run by a woman named Carol Stevens who always had fresh coffee brewing. The post office was managed by an elderly man named Howard who liked to tell stories about working for the Postal Service since 1962. Angela knew these people, knew their routines, knew their families. Angela arrived at the T intersection where Marlow should be at 2:47 p.m. according to her dashboard clock, but Marlow wasn't there. The intersection existed. County Road 15 and County Road 22 met at a T exactly as shown on her maps, but there was no town, no general store, no post office, no houses, just forest, dense trees pressing close to the roadside as if the town had never existed. Angela pulled over onto the shoulder, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. This was the right intersection. She'd driven to Marlow hundreds of times. This was the exact spot. The GPS confirmed it. The road signs confirmed it. But the town was gone, completely gone, not demolished or abandoned. Just gone, replaced by forest that looked like it had been there for decades. She climbed out of her van and walked to where Carol's general store should be. There was nothing but trees. Old trees, oak and poplar, their trunks thick with age. These trees had been growing for 50 years or more. There was no sign that a building had ever stood here. No foundation, no debris, no clearing in the forest. Angela pulled out her phone and searched for Marlow, Kentucky. Google Maps showed the town right where she was standing. Street View had images of Marlow from 2018, showing the general store, the post office, the houses. But when Angela looked around, she saw only forest. She called the Pikeville Depot. Her supervisor answered on the second ring. "Hey Angela, what's up?" "Dave, something really strange is happening. I'm at the Marlow stop, but the town isn't here. It's just gone." "What do you mean gone?" "You're at the wrong location." "No, I'm at the right intersection. County Road 15 and 22, but there's no town, just forest. The whole town has disappeared." Silence on the other end. Then, "Angela, are you feeling okay? Did you hit your head or something?" "I'm serious. Marlow isn't here, the buildings are gone, everything's gone." "Angela, I don't know what you're seeing, but I need you to figure out where you actually are and get back en route. You've got 5 more stops today." "Dave, I'm telling you." "Angela, focus. Check your GPS, make your remaining deliveries. We'll talk when you get back to the depot." The call ended. Angela stared at her phone, frustration and confusion warring inside her. She wasn't crazy. She was at the right location, but Marlow wasn't here. She got back in her van and consulted her delivery list. She had 3 packages for Marlow. One for Carol Stevens at the general store. One for Howard at the post office. One for a family named Patterson who lived in a white house at the end of Elm Street, Marlow's only named street. Angela tried calling Carol's phone number, which she had saved in her contacts from previous delivery issues. The call went through, ringing 3 times before someone answered. "Hello," Carol's voice, unmistakable. Angela had heard it every Monday for 11 years. Carol Stevens." "Yes, who's this?" "It's Angela Morrison, the courier. I have a package for you, but I'm at Marlow and I can't find the store. Can you help me locate it?" A long pause. "Angela, did you say Marlow?" "Yes, I'm at the intersection of County Road 15 and 22, but there's no town here." "Honey, Marlow doesn't exist anymore. It hasn't existed for 40 years. Angela felt her stomach drop. "What? Carol, I was there last Monday. I delivered packages to your store." "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never lived in Marlow. My family left when I was a child, back in 1982 when they built the dam and flooded the valley. The whole town was relocated. Most people moved to Pikeville or Jenkins. There's nothing left of Marlow but forest now." "Carol, this doesn't make sense. I've been delivering packages to Marlow every Monday for years. To your store. You always have coffee brewing. You told me about your granddaughter starting college last fall." "Angela, I think you're confused. I've never run a store. I work at the county clerk's office, and I don't have any grandchildren." The call ended. Angela sat in her van, hands shaking. What Carol had said couldn't be true, but the evidence was right in front of her. No town, just forest. Old forest that had been growing for decades. Angela searched online for information about Marlow, Kentucky. She found a Wikipedia article that confirmed what Carol had told her. The town of Marlow had been demolished in 1982 to make way for the Yatesville Lake Reservoir. The 120 residents had been relocated. The town had been completely removed, the land returned to forest. The reservoir project had ultimately been completed in 1993, though it hadn't actually flooded the site where Marlow stood. The town had been demolished anyway as part of the land acquisition process. But Angela had been delivering packages to Marlow for 11 years, had talked to Carol Stevens every week, had delivered medications to Howard at the post office, had seen the white church where Sunday services were held. None of this made sense. She tried calling Howard's number. The call didn't go through. "The number you have dialed is not in service." Angela pulled up the other package addresses. The Patterson family on Elm Street. She searched for their phone number in the online directory. No listing. She searched for the Patterson name in eastern Kentucky. Hundreds of results, but none in Marlow, because there was no Marlow. Desperate for answers, Angela drove to the Pikeville Library, abandoning her remaining deliveries. She needed to understand what was happening. The library had historical archives, old newspapers on microfilm. Angela spent 3 hours searching through records from the early 1980s. She found articles about Marlow's demolition. Photos of the town being torn down, buildings reduced to rubble, families loading possessions into moving trucks. She found a list of Marlow residents from 1980. Carol Stevens was on the list, age 11. Howard Begley was there too, age 40. The Patterson family, Robert, Susan, and their 3 children. But Angela had delivered packages to these people, had talked to them, had seen them living their normal lives in a town that supposedly hadn't existed for 40 years. How was that possible? Angela found one more article dated December 1982 after the demolition was complete. The headline read, "Former Marlow residents report strange sightings." The article described how several people who'd lived in Marlow reported seeing the town still standing when they drove past the site. They'd see the buildings, the streets, even people walking around. But when they stopped to investigate, there was nothing but forest. The sightings were dismissed as nostalgia and imagination, people's minds filling in what they expected to see rather than accepting the loss of their hometown. But this was different. Angela had never lived in Marlow. She had no nostalgic attachment to the place. She'd only known it as a stop on her delivery route. Yet she'd been delivering packages there every week for years, to a town that didn't exist, to people who'd moved away decades ago. Angela returned to her van and drove back to the intersection where Marlow should be. The sun was setting now, casting long shadows through the forest. She parked and walked into the woods, following what she remembered as Elm Street. If she was right, Carol's store should be about 200 yards straight ahead. She walked through the trees, stepping over fallen logs and pushing through undergrowth. And then she saw it, a building, not solid but translucent like a ghost. Carol's General Store, exactly as Angela remembered it, but fading in and out of visibility like a bad television signal. Angela approached slowly. Through the translucent walls, she could see inside the store, shelves stocked with goods, the counter where Carol always stood, and Carol herself, younger than Angela remembered her, maybe in her 30s, serving a customer Angela didn't recognize. Angela reached out to touch the building. Her hand passed through it like it wasn't there. The store was just an image, a projection of something that no longer existed, or something that existed somewhere else in some other time, visible through a crack in reality. As Angela watched, other buildings appeared around her, translucent houses, the post office with Howard standing outside talking to a neighbor, the white church with its steeple pointing toward the darkening sky, the entire town of Marlow, overlaid on the forest like a double-exposed photograph. And then Angela saw herself, walking up to Carol's store with a package under her arm. But it wasn't present-day Angela. This Angela was younger, wearing a uniform from a delivery company that had gone out of business 5 years ago. This Angela walked through the translucent door, greeted Carol, handed her the package, accepted a cup of coffee. Angela was watching herself deliver a package to a town that didn't exist, in a time that might be past or present or something in between. The images faded. The buildings disappeared. Angela was left standing in the dark forest, alone, with only the sound of wind through the trees. She walked back to her van, got in, and sat there until her hands stopped shaking enough to drive. When Angela returned to the depot, Dave was furious about the abandoned deliveries. Angela tried to explain, but how could she? What could she say that wouldn't sound insane? She'd been delivering packages to a ghost town for 11 years. She'd talked to people who'd moved away decades ago. She'd experienced something that shouldn't be possible. Angela quit her job the next day. She couldn't drive that route anymore. Couldn't face the possibility of seeing Marlowe appear again, that translucent overlay of a town that shouldn't exist. She took a job at a warehouse, something that kept her off the roads, away from the mountains. But sometimes Angela drives back to that intersection. She doesn't know why. Some compulsion she can't explain. She parks and walks into the forest where Marlowe should be. Usually she sees nothing but trees. But occasionally, usually around dusk, she'll see them. The translucent buildings, the ghost town shimmering in and out of existence. And she'll see the people, including her younger self, going about their routines in a place that was demolished 40 years ago. Angela has researched other dam projects in the region, other towns that were relocated or demolished. She's found a pattern. Other delivery drivers report similar experiences. Driving to towns that shouldn't exist anymore, talking to people who moved away decades ago, making deliveries to addresses in places that were destroyed. There's something about these displaced towns, these communities that were erased from the landscape. They don't want to be forgotten. They still exist somehow, overlapping with the present, visible to people who knew them or were supposed to know them. The buildings are gone, the people scattered, but the town itself persists as some kind of echo, a memory that refuses to fade. Angela keeps a list of package deliveries she made to Marlowe, hundreds of them over 11 years. She has photos she took of the town on her phone, though the images are strange now, showing buildings that appear partially transparent, people who look slightly out of focus. Evidence of something impossible. She doesn't know what to do with this knowledge. Who would believe her? But she knows that Marlowe is still there in some form, still waiting for its Monday deliveries, still expecting Angela to show up with packages for Carol and Howard and the Patterson family. And someday, Angela thinks, she might go back for real, might walk into that translucent general store and not come out, might become part of the ghost town herself, trapped in a place that doesn't exist, delivering packages forever to people who moved away decades ago. Because that's what happens to the towns that moved. They don't really move. They stay behind, echoes of themselves, waiting for someone to remember them, waiting for someone to acknowledge they still exist, waiting for someone to make the final delivery and never leave. Story 8. The Scale That Weighed Wrong. Dennis Kowalski had been driving trucks through the Appalachian coal regions for 19 years, specializing in hauling heavy equipment and construction materials. His routes took him through West Virginia, eastern Kentucky, and southwestern Virginia, delivering to mines and construction sites in some of the most remote areas of the mountains. Dennis was known for his meticulous attention to weight regulations. He'd never been cited for an overweight load in nearly 2 decades of driving. On July 23, 2021, Dennis was hauling a load of drilling equipment from a manufacturer in Ohio to a mining operation in West Virginia. His load was heavy, pushing close to the legal limit, but he'd weighed it carefully before departure. According to the certified scale at the loading facility, his gross vehicle weight was 79,800 pounds, safely under the 80,000-pound federal limit. He had the weight ticket in his logbook to prove it. Dennis was driving his 2019 Kenworth T680 with a flatbed trailer, the drilling equipment secured with chains and binders. It was a hot summer afternoon, temperature in the low 90s, the air thick and humid. Dennis followed Interstate 64 into West Virginia, making good time despite the heavy load. Around 4:30 p.m., he saw signs for a weigh station ahead. West Virginia weigh stations were notoriously strict, but Dennis wasn't concerned. His load was legal. His logbook was up to date. His truck was properly maintained. He'd sailed through dozens of weigh stations without issue. He followed the signs directing commercial vehicles to enter the station, slowing as he approached the scales. The weigh station looked normal, a typical facility with a scale built into the roadway and a small office building where DOT officers checked paperwork. A sign displayed the current status: all trucks must stop. Dennis rolled onto the scale and waited for the signal. The light turned green, indicating he should proceed to the office. Dennis parked his truck and walked into the building carrying his logbook and weight ticket. A DOT officer sat behind a desk, looking at a computer screen. "Afternoon," Dennis said. "Just rolled across the scale, everything should be in order." The officer looked up, his expression strange. Not hostile, but confused. "Sir, we need to talk about your weight." Dennis felt a flicker of concern. "Is there a problem? I've got the weight ticket from this morning. Loaded at 79,800 pounds. The officer turned his computer screen so Dennis could see it. The display showed the results from the scale Dennis had just driven across. Gross vehicle weight, 112,460 pounds. Dennis stared at the number, his mind refusing to accept it. "That's impossible. That's 32,000 pounds over what I loaded this morning. There's no way." "Sir, our scales are certified and calibrated weekly. You're showing 112,460 pounds. That's significantly overweight. I need to see your bill of lading and weight ticket." Dennis handed over the documents with shaking hands. The officer examined them carefully, comparing the morning weight to the current reading. The math didn't work. Dennis's load would have had to nearly double in weight between Ohio and West Virginia. Physically impossible. "Sir, is there any cargo you picked up between your loading point and here? Any additional weight added to the trailer?" "No, I drove straight from Ohio. Same load, nothing added," the officer frowned. "I'm going to have you roll across the scale again. Maybe there was an error with the first reading." Dennis returned to his truck and carefully backed off the scale, then drove forward across it again. He parked and walked back to the office. The officer was staring at his computer screen, his expression now genuinely disturbed. "Sir, the second reading shows 119,850 pounds. You gained weight between the two scale readings, over 7,000 pounds in 5 minutes. Dennis felt his chest tight. "That's not possible. I didn't add anything to the truck. How can I gain weight sitting at a weigh station?" "I don't know, but something is very wrong here. I'm going to have a physical inspection done on your truck and cargo." 2 more officers came out to examine Dennis's truck. They inspected every piece of equipment on the trailer, checking the serial numbers against the bill of lading. Everything matched. The drilling equipment was exactly what Dennis had loaded that morning. Nothing had been added. They checked the trailer for hidden compartments or additional cargo. Nothing. One of the officers climbed under the truck with a flashlight, checking the fuel tanks, the frame, the suspension. When he emerged, he looked baffled. Nothing unusual. Standard truck and trailer. No explanation for the weight discrepancy. The first officer called Dennis back into the office. "Sir, I'm going to have you drive across the scale one more time. This time I want you to watch the display yourself." Dennis climbed back into his truck, his hands sweating despite the air conditioning. He drove slowly onto the scale, watching through his windshield as a large digital display showed the weight reading. The numbers climbed as more of the truck rolled onto the scale. 10,000 pounds, 30,000 pounds, 50,000 pounds, and then the numbers went crazy. 80,000 pounds, 95,000 pounds, 110,000 pounds, 125,000 pounds. The weight kept increasing even though Dennis's truck was completely stationary on the scale. He could see all his wheels were on the scale platform. Nothing was being added, but the numbers kept climbing. 140,000 pounds, 150,000 pounds. Dennis felt a strange sensation like the truck was sinking. He looked out his windows. The truck appeared normal. Nothing was visibly different, but the scale kept showing increasing weight. 175,000 pounds, 190,000 pounds. The officer's voice crackled over an intercom. "Sir, get off the scale. Get off now." Dennis didn't need to be told twice. He pressed the accelerator, pulling his truck forward off the scale platform. The moment his rear wheels left the scale, the sensation of sinking stopped. He parked and practically ran back to the office. The officer looked pale. "I don't understand what just happened. The scale showed your weight increasing to over 200,000 pounds. That's impossible. Your truck and trailer together couldn't hold that much even if they were made of solid lead." "What the hell is going on?" Dennis demanded. "Is your scale broken?" I don't think so. Let me try something." The officer called to one of his colleagues. "Run your patrol vehicle across the scale." A DOT patrol car, a standard SUV, drove onto the scale. The display showed a normal reading, 5,670 pounds. The weight stayed constant. The SUV drove off without issue. "Now you again," the officer told Dennis. Dennis's stomach nodded, but he complied. He drove back onto the scale. This time the weight reading started normal, 45,000 pounds for the tractor, 35,000 pounds for the trailer and load, total around 80,000 pounds. Normal, legal, exactly what it should be. Dennis sat on the scale for a full minute. The weight didn't change, stayed at exactly 79,850 pounds, which matched his morning weight ticket almost perfectly. He drove off and returned to the office, completely confused now. The officer looked equally baffled. "Your weight is legal, 79,850 pounds. I don't know what happened with those first 3 readings." "So can I go?" The officer hesitated. "Sir, I witnessed something impossible here. 3 scale readings showing your truck gaining weight while sitting still. But the current reading is legal and matches your documentation. I have no legal grounds to hold you, but I'm going to note this in our records as an equipment malfunction and have the scale recalibrated." Dennis practically fled the weigh station. He drove for 20 miles before pulling over at a rest area, his hands still shaking. What had happened back there? The scale had shown his truck gaining tens of thousands of pounds while sitting motionless. That violated every law of physics Dennis understood. He called his dispatcher and explained the situation, leaving out the more impossible details. Just reported that the weigh station had experienced equipment problems but ultimately cleared his weight. The dispatcher was annoyed by the delay but satisfied that Dennis hadn't been cited. Dennis continued his delivery, reaching the mining site around 7:30 p.m. The equipment was unloaded without issue. Dennis weighed his empty truck at a public scale near the mine, 34,200 pounds, normal for an empty tractor and flatbed trailer. That night, Dennis stayed at a truck stop near Charleston, West Virginia. He couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about those scale readings, watching the numbers climb impossibly high. He felt the truck sinking, felt some invisible weight pressing down on it. Around 2:00 a.m., unable to sleep, Dennis started searching online for similar incidents. He found a forum where truckers discuss strange experiences on the road. After an hour of searching, he found a thread that made his blood run cold. A driver from Pennsylvania posted about his experience at the same West Virginia weigh station 3 months earlier. His truck had shown massive weight increases while sitting on the scale, just like Dennis's had. But this driver had been hauling coal, and the DOT officers had arrested him, convinced he was carrying illegal overweight loads. The driver had been detained for 6 hours while his truck was completely unloaded and each piece of coal weighed individually. The total weight matched his bill of lading perfectly. He'd been released with apologies for the equipment malfunction. Other drivers reported similar experiences at that same weigh station, always with the same pattern. First scale readings showed massive overweight. Subsequent readings showed the weight increasing while the truck sat motionless. Then final readings showed correct legal weight, always dismissed as equipment malfunction. But one post caught Dennis's attention. An older driver who'd worked in West Virginia for 40 years wrote about the location of that weigh station. It had been built in 1987 on the site of a former coal mine. Not an active mine, but an abandoned one from the early 1900s. The mine had collapsed in 1923, killing 47 miners who were trapped underground. Their bodies were never recovered. The mine was sealed, and eventually a highway was built over the site. The way station came decades later. The old driver's post concluded with a chilling observation. The scale isn't malfunctioning, it's weighing correctly. It's just weighing everything on it, including what's underneath it. 47 bodies still buried, still trapped. The scale knows they're there. Sometimes it counts them too. Dennis closed the forum, his hands trembling. It couldn't be true. Scales didn't work that way. They measured the weight pressing down on them, not weight buried beneath them. The post was just a ghost story an urban legend truckers told each other. But Dennis had felt it. That sensation of sinking, of being pulled down, like something beneath the scale was reaching up, trying to drag his truck down into the earth. The next morning, Dennis ran his empty truck across a scale at the truck stop. Normal weight, 34,250 pounds. He drove back to Ohio without incident, dropped his trailer at the terminal, and took 3 days off before his next assignment. Dennis drove trucks for another 8 months after that experience, but he could never shake the memory of those scale readings, watching his truck's weight climb to impossible numbers. He started avoiding that particular way station, routing around it even when it cost him extra miles. Other drivers noticed and asked why. Dennis would just say the scales were unreliable there, equipment problems. In March 2022, Dennis quit trucking entirely, took a job as a dispatcher, something that kept him off the roads. He'd had enough of the strange things that happened in the mountains, the places where reality seemed thinner, where impossible events occurred and everyone pretended they hadn't. But Dennis still monitors that trucker forum, still reads the reports from drivers who stop at that West Virginia way station. The reports keep coming. Trucks showing impossible weights, scales that count not just the vehicle but something else, something underneath, something buried and trapped and still trying to make its presence known. The state has recalibrated the scales 7 times in the past 2 years. The readings keep happening. Trucks that suddenly weigh twice what they should, weight that increases while the vehicle sits motionless. And always that sensation drivers report, the feeling of being pulled down, of something beneath the pavement reaching up toward them. Dennis knows what the scale is really weighing. It's measuring the weight of 47 miners who never left the mine, who were crushed under tons of rock and earth in 1923, who were sealed in the darkness and forgotten, their bodies never recovered, their graves never marked. The scale knows they're there. It counts them, adds their weight to whatever truck is sitting on the platform above their mass grave. And sometimes when the connection is strongest, when the barrier between the surface and the depths below grows thin, those 47 miners reach up toward the trucks passing over their tomb. They don't mean harm. They're just trying to be remembered, trying to remind the world that they're still there, still buried, still waiting after a century for someone to acknowledge their deaths. The scale weighs them, counts them, records their presence in impossible numbers that violate every law of physics. And Dennis knows that any truck stopping there might experience the same thing, might feel that pull from below, might watch their weight climb to numbers that can't be real as 47 dead miners make their presence known the only way they can, by making the earth weigh more, by adding their dead weight to the living vehicles passing over their graves. The scale isn't broken. It's weighing exactly what's there, everything that's there, including the dead. Story 9. The cargo THAT listened. Raymond Fisher had been driving specialized transport trucks for 15 years, hauling cargo that required climate control, security, and careful handling. His routes covered the eastern United States, delivering pharmaceuticals, laboratory equipment, and other sensitive materials. Raymond took his job seriously. He'd never had a cargo loss, never had a security breach, never failed to deliver on time. On October 8, 2020, Raymond accepted a special assignment hauling a sealed cargo container from a research facility in Maryland to another facility in Tennessee. The cargo manifest was vague, listing only laboratory equipment fragile temperature sensitive. Nothing unusual for Raymond's specialized work. He'd hauled similar loads dozens of times. What was unusual were the specific instructions from the shipping company. The cargo container was to remain sealed at all times. Raymond was not to open it under any circumstances. The trailer's temperature was to be maintained at exactly 38 degrees Fahrenheit throughout the journey, and Raymond was instructed to avoid stopping except for fuel, and then only at approved locations specified in his route documents. Raymond loaded the container at the Maryland facility under the supervision of security personnel wearing lab coats. The container was about the size of a large shipping crate, maybe 8 feet long by 4 feet wide by 4 feet tall. It was made of white plastic or fiberglass with no markings except a serial number stenciled on one side. Heavy-duty locks secured the lid. Once it was loaded onto Raymond's climate-controlled trailer and the temperature systems activated, the security personnel sealed the trailer doors and gave Raymond his paperwork. "Don't open the trailer," one of them said, looking directly at Raymond. "Don't open the container. Don't turn off the temperature control. Just drive straight to Tennessee. Understand?" "I've done this kind of haul before," Raymond replied. "Standard secure transport protocols. This is different. The cargo is sensitive. Any temperature variation or security breach could damage it beyond repair. The company is paying triple your normal rate specifically because we need absolute adherence to protocols." Raymond nodded. Triple rate meant this cargo was extremely valuable. He didn't need to know what was inside. He just needed to deliver it safely. The first 4 hours of the drive were uneventful. Raymond followed Interstate 70 west through Maryland into West Virginia, maintaining steady speed, monitoring the trailer temperature constantly. The gauge showed a steady 38 degrees. Everything was normal. Around 8:30 p.m., as Raymond was driving through the mountains of West Virginia on Interstate 79 southbound, he heard a sound from the trailer. A thump, not loud but distinct. Something shifting inside the cargo container. Raymond checked his mirrors. The trailer looked fine, riding normally behind the tractor. The temperature gauge still showed 38 degrees. He continued driving, assuming the sound was just the cargo settling as the truck navigated curves in the mountain highway. Then he heard it again. Thump, thump, a rhythmic sound like something knocking against the inside of the container. Raymond's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Cargo didn't make sounds like that. Laboratory equipment didn't knock rhythmically. The thumping continued, growing louder. Raymond could hear it clearly now over the sound of the engine and road noise. Thump, thump, thump. 3 steady knocks, a pause, then 3 more knocks, repeating, consistent. Raymond grabbed his CB radio thinking he'd call his dispatcher, but before he could key the microphone, he heard something else from the trailer. A voice, muffled, barely audible over the truck's noise, but definitely a human voice. "Let me out, please, let me out." Raymond nearly swerved off the road. He pulled over onto the shoulder, his heart hammering. That couldn't be right. There couldn't be a person in that container. It was laboratory equipment. The manifest said laboratory equipment, but he just heard someone speaking, someone asking to be let out. Raymond climbed out of the cab and walked back to the trailer. He stood beside it listening. The thumping had stopped. No voices. Just the hum of the refrigeration unit maintaining the 38-degree temperature. "Hello," Raymond called out. "Is someone in there?" No response. Raymond pulled out his phone and called the shipping company's emergency number. A woman answered on the 3rd ring. "This is Raymond Fisher on transport assignment MDTN 447. I need to speak to a supervisor immediately. I'm hearing sounds from the cargo container." "What kind of sounds?" "Knocking, and a voice. Someone asking to be let out. Is there a person in this container?" A long pause. "Mr. Fisher, there is no person in the container. The cargo is laboratory equipment. You're hearing the temperature regulation system. Condensers and pumps make noises that can sound unusual." This sounded like a human voice. "Mr. Fisher, you are not to open the trailer. You are not to open the container. Those are your instructions. Continue to your destination. The cargo must maintain temperature control. But if there's someone, there is no person in the container. Continue your route. That is a direct order." The call ended. Raymond stood beside the trailer, conflicted. What if there really was someone in there? What if some kind of accident had occurred at the loading facility, someone got sealed inside, but the shipping company insisted the cargo was just equipment, and opening the trailer would breach his contract, could cost him his job? Raymond got back in the cab and continued driving. He tried to convince himself it was just equipment noise, mechanical sounds that his tired brain had interpreted as a voice. But after 20 minutes, the thumping started again. Thump, thump, thump. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, over and over. Then the voice again, clearer this time. "Please, it's cold, let me out, it's so cold." Raymond pulled over again, this time at a rest area. He couldn't ignore this. He walked back to the trailer and pressed his ear against the door. The voice was definitely coming from inside, not from the refrigeration unit, from the container. "I'm going to open the trailer," Raymond said, speaking toward the door. "Hold on." He walked to the rear doors and broke the security seal. His hands were shaking as he opened the doors and climbed inside the refrigerated space. The cold hit him immediately, his breath forming clouds. The white container sat in the center of the trailer, secured with straps. Raymond approached it carefully. The knocking was coming from inside the container. Thump, thump, thump. Raymond could see the container vibrating slightly with each impact. "Hello," Raymond called. "Can you hear me?" "Yes, please." "I can't breathe, let me out." Raymond examined the locks on the container lid. Heavy industrial locks requiring keys he didn't have. He'd need tools to break them. He ran back to his cab and grabbed a tire iron from his tool kit. When he returned to the trailer, he wedged the tire iron under one of the locks and pried. The lock broke with a snap. "Almost there," Raymond said. "Just a minute more." He broke the second lock, the third, the fourth. All the locks were now broken, the container lid no longer secured. Raymond took a breath, then lifted the lid. Cold vapor poured out, condensation from the 38-degree environment meeting the slightly warmer air. Raymond waved it away, trying to see inside the container. The vapor cleared and Raymond saw what was inside. Nothing. The container was empty. No laboratory equipment. No person. Just an empty white plastic shell lined with insulation. Completely empty. But the voice spoke again, right beside Raymond's ear, so close he could feel the breath. "Thank you for opening it. I've been waiting so long for someone to open it." Raymond spun around. Nobody there. He was alone in the trailer, but he could still hear the voice now coming from multiple directions surrounding him. "We've been traveling with drivers like you for years, sealed in containers, locked in cargo, waiting for someone to break the rules. Waiting for someone to open the container and let us out." Raymond backed toward the trailer doors. The temperature gauge on the wall was going haywire, the numbers dropping rapidly. 38 degrees, 30 degrees, 20 degrees. The refrigeration unit was running full power, but the temperature was plummeting. "What are you?" Raymond managed to ask. "We're what happens when research goes wrong, when scientists try to create something they shouldn't. We were human once. Test subjects, volunteers who didn't know what we were volunteering for. The experiments changed us, made us into something else, something that can't survive in normal temperatures, something that needs the cold." The vapor inside the trailer was thickening, forming shapes, human-shaped shadows in the mist. Raymond could see faces now, or suggestions of faces formed from the condensation. Eyes, mouths, expressions of pain and pleading. "They couldn't kill us, we're too resilient now, but they can't let us exist either, so they transport us. Move us from facility to facility in sealed containers, keep us in the cold where we can survive but can't escape. Sometimes a driver hears us. Sometimes they open the container, and then we're free for a little while. Raymond tried to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The cold had reached 5 degrees now. His breath came in gasps. Ice was forming on the trailer walls, on the empty container, on Raymond's clothing. "Don't worry," the voices said. "We won't hurt you. We just want it out." Wanted to feel space that isn't a sealed container, but now we've been exposed to warm air. Now the containment has been broken. The facility will know. They'll send teams to recapture us. They always do. Raymond's phone rang, the sound shockingly loud in the frozen trailer. With numb fingers, he pulled it from his pocket and answered. "Mr. Fisher, our sensors show containment breach." It was the woman from the shipping company, her voice cold and professional. "Secure yourself in your cab immediately and drive at least 1 mile from your current location." "What's in the container?" Raymond demanded through chattering teeth. "What did I release?" "Secure yourself now. A containment team is en route. You have approximately 3 minutes before sterilization protocols activate." The call ended. Raymond forced his frozen legs to move, stumbling toward the trailer doors. The vapor shapes didn't stop him. They simply watched as he climbed out of the trailer and ran to his cab. He started the engine, released the air brake, and accelerated out of the rest area, leaving the trailer behind. In his mirror, he could see the vapor pouring out of the open trailer doors, spreading across the parking lot like fog. Raymond drove exactly 1 mile and pulled over. 2 minutes later, a helicopter appeared overhead, searchlights illuminating the rest area behind him. Raymond watched as vehicles arrived, people in white hazmat suits approaching his trailer. They were carrying equipment that looked like flamethrowers. Fire erupted in the rest area. Not normal fire, but bright white flame that burned cold instead of hot. Raymond could see it even from a mile away, a pillar of frozen fire that consumed the vapor, drove it back into the trailer, sealed it in walls of ice. The entire procedure took 12 minutes. When it was finished, the hazmat team closed Raymond's trailer doors and sealed them with what looked like welding equipment. One of them drove the trailer, still attached to Raymond's tractor, away from the rest area. Another hazmat team member approached Raymond's cab. A speaker crackled. "Mr. Fisher, your trailer will be returned after decontamination. You will be compensated for the delay. You will sign documents stating you saw nothing unusual tonight. You will not discuss this incident with anyone." "Agreed," Raymond nodded, too shocked to argue. "The cargo has been recontained. No permanent breach occurred. You prevented a larger incident by maintaining proximity to the container during exposure. However, you violated protocols by opening it. Your compensation will reflect both factors." The hazmat team left. Raymond sat in his cab for 2 hours until another truck arrived pulling his trailer. The trailer looked normal now, no signs of the ice or fire. The container was still inside, sealed again with new locks. The security seals on the trailer doors had been replaced. "Delivered to Tennessee as originally planned," the delivery driver told Raymond. "Everything is secure now." Raymond completed the delivery in silence. He didn't hear any sounds from the container for the remaining 4 hours of the drive. When he reached the Tennessee facility, the same type of security personnel unloaded the container without comment. Raymond signed the delivery paperwork and left immediately. 3 days later, Raymond received a check for $47,000, triple his normal rate plus a discretion bonus. He also received a contract amendment with a non-disclosure agreement requiring his signature. Raymond signed it. What else could he do? Raymond still drives specialized transport. He still hauls sensitive cargo in climate-controlled trailers, but now he listens more carefully to the sounds coming from the containers. And sometimes, usually late at night on empty stretches of highway, he hears them. Voices from sealed cargo, knocking from inside containers, requests to be let out. But Raymond never opens the containers anymore, never breaks the seals. He just drives, maintaining exactly 38 degrees, following his protocols, delivering cargo that sometimes isn't cargo at all but something else. Something that was human once. Something that's being moved from place to place because nobody knows what else to do with them. The experiments that created them failed, but the subjects didn't die. They just changed, became something that can't survive outside precisely controlled environments. So they travel endlessly, sealed in containers, moved from facility to facility, kept cold enough to survive but isolated enough that they can't threaten anyone. And they call out to the drivers, beg to be released, hope that someone will break protocols and open the container. Because for just a few minutes before the containment teams arrive with their cold fire and ice walls, they can exist outside their prison, can spread like vapor, can remember what it felt like to be free. Raymond has learned to ignore the voices, learned to block out the knocking, learned to just drive and deliver and collect his triple-rate pay. But he knows they're in there, those things that used to be human. He knows they're conscious and aware and desperate. And he knows that all across America, sealed in climate-controlled trailers, locked in containers with vague manifests listing laboratory equipment, there are others, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all being moved constantly, transported between facilities, kept at exactly 38 degrees, their existence denied, their voices unheard. The cargo that listens, that speaks, that was human once, still being driven through the mountains late at night by truckers who have learned not to ask questions, still knocking, still calling out, still hoping someone will let them out. Story 10, the exit that came back. William Drake had been driving 18-wheelers through Appalachia for 21 years. His specialty was overnight runs, deliveries that departed at midnight and arrived at dawn. He preferred the night shift, less traffic, cooler temperatures, peaceful highways where he could think and listen to audiobooks while the world slept. On December 14, 2019, William was hauling a load of automotive parts from Detroit to Atlanta, a route that would take him through Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky before dropping south into Georgia. He departed Detroit at 11:45 p.m., his trailer loaded with 43,000 pounds of transmission components destined for an assembly plant outside Atlanta. The weather was clear and cold, perfect for winter driving. William followed Interstate 75 south through Ohio, crossing into Kentucky around 3:30 a.m. Traffic was almost non-existent at this hour, just a few other trucks and the occasional car. William was making excellent time ahead of schedule, with fuel stops planned at specific intervals based on years of experience with this route. Around 4:15 a.m., as William was approaching Lexington, Kentucky, he saw a sign for an exit he didn't recognize. Exit 118B, Ashton Grove Gas Food Lodging. William frowned. He knew this stretch of I-75 intimately. There was no exit 118B. Exit 118 was the regular Lexington exit. There was no 118B, and he'd never heard of a place called Ashton Grove. But the sign was real, a standard green interstate exit sign, clearly marked and well lit. William checked his GPS. The map showed no exit 118B, just exit 118, then exit 119 3 miles further south. William figured it must be a new exit, recently added to ease traffic congestion around Lexington. The GPS probably hadn't updated yet. William didn't need the exit. His fuel was fine. He wasn't hungry. He continued past, the exit ramp branching off to his right. In his mirrors, he could see the exit disappearing behind him, streetlights illuminating what looked like a typical small town off-ramp. 20 minutes later, William saw the sign again. Exit 118B, Ashton Grove Gas Food Lodging. He'd already passed it. He was now approaching exit 126 according to his GPS. But there was the sign, identical to before. Same exit, same town name. Impossible unless he'd somehow turned around without realizing it. But William had been driving straight south on I-75 the entire time. He hadn't exited, hadn't turned around. He'd passed maybe 4 other vehicles in the past 20 minutes. The highway had been straight and normal. William checked his odometer. He'd driven 17.3 miles since first seeing the exit 118B sign. He should be well past Lexington now, approaching Richmond. But there was the exit again, the ramp branching off to the right, the green sign clearly marking it as exit 118B. William's unease was growing, but he continued past the exit. He wasn't going to be spooked by a confusing exit sign. Maybe the highway department had added multiple exits with the same designation. Unusual but not impossible. 15 minutes later, exit 118B, Ashton Grove Gas Food Lodging. Third time. William had now driven approximately 30 miles since first seeing the exit, but it kept reappearing. He checked his GPS more carefully. The map showed him traveling south on I-75 between Lexington and Richmond. Normal route. No indication of any loops or circular sections. He was moving steadily southward according to the GPS, but the exit kept appearing. William decided to take it. Whatever Ashton Grove was, he needed to understand why this exit kept showing up. He signaled and took the ramp, slowing as he descended from the interstate. The exit looked normal, a standard 2-lane off-ramp curving down from the elevated highway. At the bottom, a stop sign marked the intersection with a 2-lane road. William stopped and looked around. To his right, he could see what appeared to be a small town. Streetlights illuminated a main street with perhaps a dozen buildings. He could make out a gas station, a diner, a small motel. All the lights were on, making the town look inviting despite the early hour. To his left, the road disappeared into darkness, heading away from the town. William turned right toward the town. Something felt off, but he couldn't identify what. The buildings looked normal. The streetlights were modern. Everything appeared contemporary and well-maintained. But the town felt empty. No cars parked on the street. No movement in the buildings despite all the lights being on. William pulled into the gas station. The pumps were modern, the price display showing current rates. But nobody was visible inside the convenience store despite the interior lights being on and the open sign illuminated. William climbed out of his cab and approached the nearest pump. He swiped his credit card. The pump authorized and displayed begin fueling. William lifted the nozzle and began filling his tank. The fuel flowed normally, the numbers on the pump clicking upward. Normal. Everything was normal except for the complete absence of people. When his tank was full, William replaced the nozzle and walked toward the convenience store. He pushed open the door. A bell chimed. The interior was well lit and fully stocked, shelves filled with snacks and drinks, coffee brewing and machines on the counter, but nobody was there. No clerk, no customers, just an empty store that looked like it was actively operating but abandoned. "Hello," William called out. "Anyone here?" No response. William walked through the store, checking the back room, the restrooms, the office. Nobody. The cash register was on, the computer display showing a normal point-of-sale system ready to process transactions, but no person to operate it. William took a bottle of water from a cooler, left $5 on the counter and walked back to his truck. The unease that had been building now felt like genuine alarm. An entire town with all the lights on, all the businesses appearing open, but not a single person visible. William climbed back into his truck and drove further into town. Past the diner, where he could see through the windows into a brightly lit interior with tables set and ready for customers. Past the motel, where every window glowed with light but no vehicles sat in the parking lot. Past a small grocery store, its open sign bright, its interior illuminated but nobody inside. At the far end of town, maybe half a mile from where he'd entered, the streetlights ended. The road continued into darkness, presumably leading back to I-75 or to another highway. William could see what looked like an on-ramp ahead, a road climbing back up to an elevated highway. William accelerated toward the on-ramp, eager to get back on the interstate and leave this empty town behind. He followed the ramp as it curved upward, merging back onto what should be I-75 southbound. A green sign confirmed it. Interstate 75 South Atlanta. William merged into the right lane and continued south. He checked his clock. 5:02 a.m. He'd lost about 30 minutes exploring Ashton Grove. Not ideal, but he was still ahead of schedule. He'd make up the time. 10 minutes later, he saw the sign. Exit 118B, Ashton Grove Gas Food Lodging. The same exit. William felt his chest tight. He'd just left Ashton Grove. He'd driven through the town and gotten back on I-75. He should be miles south of that exit now. But there it was again, exactly as before. This time, William didn't take it. He drove past, watching in his mirrors as the exit disappeared behind him. He maintained his speed, eyes locked on the road ahead, refusing to be drawn back to that empty town. The exit appeared again after 12 minutes. Same sign, same ramp. William gritted his teeth and drove past, and again after 10 minutes, and again after 8 minutes. The intervals were getting shorter. William was trapped in some kind of loop, I-75 continuously bringing him back to exit 118B no matter how long he drove. His fuel gauge showed he was burning diesel normally. His odometer was tracking miles, but he kept returning to the same exit, over and over, like the highway was forcing him toward Ashton Grove. After the 7th appearance of the exit, William pulled over onto the shoulder. He couldn't keep driving in circles. He needed to figure out what was happening. He grabbed his phone and tried to call his dispatcher. No signal. He tried his GPS. The device was frozen, showing him at a position that made no sense, his truck icon sitting on a gray void with no roads. William opened his driver's door and stepped out onto the shoulder. He walked around to the front of his truck, looking at the highway ahead and behind. Normal pavement, normal lane markings, normal guardrails. Everything looked exactly as it should. But he was trapped in a repeating loop that kept bringing him back to an exit for a town that shouldn't exist. In the distance, William could see the exit 118B sign, maybe a quarter mile ahead. As he watched, he saw something that made his stomach drop. Another truck was taking the exit. William could see it clearly, an 18-wheeler similar to his own, its taillights visible as it descended the ramp toward Ashton Grove. William ran back to his truck and accelerated, racing toward the exit. He had to catch that other driver, had to talk to someone else who was experiencing this same impossible situation. He took the exit at 50 miles per hour, faster than was safe, his trailer swaying as he descended the ramp. William drove into Ashton Grove and immediately saw the other truck. It was parked in front of the diner, the driver climbing down from the cab. William pulled up beside it and jumped out. "Hey." "Hey, wait," the other driver turned. It was a woman, maybe 40 years old, wearing a Schneider uniform. She looked confused and frightened. "What's going on?" she asked. "Where are we? I've been driving in circles for an hour. This exit keeps appearing." "Same here," William said, relief flooding through him. At least he wasn't alone. Exit 118B, Ashton Grove, but it's not on any maps, and the town is empty. "I noticed that. All the lights are on, but nobody's here." "I was about to check the diner. Maybe someone's inside." They walked to the diner entrance together. William pulled open the door. The interior was exactly as he'd seen through the windows. Clean, well-lit, tables set with silverware and menus, coffee brewing on a warmer, a kitchen visible through a service window, stainless steel surfaces gleaming, but no people. "This doesn't make sense," the woman said. Her name tag read Kelly. "Where is everyone?" William walked behind the counter, checking the kitchen. Fresh food in the refrigerators, clean dishes stacked and ready, everything prepared for business but nobody to run it. He returned to the dining area where Kelly was examining one of the tables. "Look at this," Kelly said, pointing to a menu. William picked it up and read the text. It was a normal diner menu listing breakfast items, burgers, sandwiches. But at the bottom in small print was a line that made his blood run cold. Welcome to Ashton Grove. Population, 0. You can't leave until you understand why. What does that mean? Kelly asked. Understand why what? William set down the menu and walked to the diner's window. He looked out at the empty street, the lit buildings, the complete absence of any life. I think Ashton Grove is trying to tell us something. This town exists for a reason, a purpose, and we're stuck here until we figure out what it is. Kelly joined him at the window. This is insane. Towns don't just appear and trap people. There has to be a rational explanation. But William had been driving long enough to know that the Appalachian Mountains held places that defied rational explanation, roads that looped back on themselves, towns that existed outside normal geography, exits that shouldn't be there. Let's check the other buildings, William suggested. Maybe there's information somewhere, a clue about what this place wants from us. They explored the motel. Every room was unlocked, every room immaculately clean with fresh linens and towels. But every room was empty. The office had a computer showing reservations, but all the names were listed as pending. The dates ranged from 1983 to 2019, suggesting the town had been trying to attract visitors for nearly 40 years. The grocery store was fully stocked but abandoned. The shelves held food with expiration dates ranging from years ago to months in the future, as if time didn't work normally in Ashton Grove. William picked up a newspaper from a rack. The date was December 14, 2019, today's date. The headline read, I-75 construction complete, exit 118B opens after delays. William showed Kelly the paper. Look at this. Exit 118B opened today. This is a real exit, or it was supposed to be. Something happened that prevented it from opening properly. They found more newspapers going back months. All of them referenced exit 118B and Ashton Grove. Articles about construction delays, articles about funding problems, articles about disputes between state highway departments and the town. The most recent article, dated a week ago, had a headline that explained everything. Ashton Grove residents evacuate as sinkhole threatens town, I-75 exit construction suspended. William and Kelly read the article together. Ashton Grove had been a real town, population 243, located just off Interstate 75. The state had agreed to build a new exit to help the town's economy. But during construction, a massive sinkhole had opened beneath the town, threatening to swallow the entire community. Residents were evacuated. The exit construction was suspended. And 3 days ago, on December 11th, the sinkhole had collapsed completely, taking the entire town into the earth. Exit 118B had never been completed. Ashton Grove no longer existed. The town and everyone in it had been evacuated before the collapse, so there were no casualties. But the place itself was gone, swallowed by the earth. We're in a ghost town, Kelly whispered. Literally, a town that doesn't exist anymore. But we're seeing it, William said. This place still exists somehow. The buildings, the streets, the lights, all of it, like an echo of what was here before. They returned to the diner and sat at one of the tables. William was trying to piece together what this meant. The menu said we can't leave until we understand why. Why what? Why the town collapsed. Why the exit was never finished. Kelly picked up the menu and read the message again. You can't leave until you understand why. She was quiet for a moment thinking, then her expression changed. Not why it happened, why we're here, why we saw this exit when it doesn't actually exist. What do you mean? Think about it. We're both night drivers, both making overnight runs, both pushed to get to our destinations on time. When did you last take a real break? When did you last stop because you needed rest, not just because you needed fuel? William thought about it. He'd been driving straight through for almost 5 hours. He was ahead of schedule, so he'd planned to keep driving until he needed fuel. No breaks, no rest, just constant forward motion because stopping meant wasting time. The exit isn't trapping us, Kelly said slowly. It's trying to save us. We're both exhausted, both driving on autopilot. Both too focused on schedules and delivery times. The exit appeared because we needed it, because we needed to stop before